Chapter 21. Not long after Xiao Lingyu found his seat, the little girl also came over. The little girl proudly said to Xiao Lingyu, "It's a good thing I saw you. Otherwise, I would have had to spend more time to find a seat." Xiao Lingyu rolled his eyes and snorted. "It's a public place. Don't make a racket." The little girl disdainfully said, "Tsh, isn't it just an auction? If it were any other time, I wouldn't even bother to come." Xiao Lingyu glanced at her and asked, "Then why are you here today?" The little girl seemed to be very serious as she said, "Because you're here." "Me? What does me being here have to do with you?" Xiao Lingyu asked in confusion. The little girl mischievously said, "Of course it has something to do with me. As for what it has to do with me, I won't tell you." Xiao Lingyu rolled his eyes again and ignored the little girl. However, the little girl's seemingly joking words made him feel that something was amiss, but he couldn't pinpoint what it was. He was certain that he didn't know this little girl. At most, this little girl looked somewhat similar to Jiang Langyue. Just as Xiao Lingyu and the little girl were talking, a person in a box not far away from them frowned. That person looked a bit fat and had two long beards on his cheeks that were black and white. Beside the fat cultivator were two other cultivators. One was wearing a cloak, and the other was wearing a Taoist robe. These three were the vagrant cultivators that had plotted against Gu Yunfei and Xiao Lingyu in the desolate ancient forest. "Brother Ba, what's the matter?" The middle-aged cultivator wearing the Taoist robe seemed to have noticed the strange expression on the fat cultivator's face and asked, "An old friend has also come. He's behind us." The fat cultivator softly reminded them. Although the box was soundproof with formations and restrictions, they had a guilty conscience and didn't dare to speak loudly. The cloaked cultivator and the fat cultivator both turned their heads to look. It was only a glance before they turned their heads back at the same time. "Why is that brat here? Could it be that he knows we're here? Gu Yunfei couldn't have also come, right?" The cultivator in the Taoist robe and the cultivator in the cloak exclaimed in surprise. The fat cultivator cautiously said, "I don't know what the situation is, but we should be careful." The cloaked cultivator asked, "Who is that little girl? She seems to be very close to that brat." The fat cultivator shook his head and said, "Who knows? I wonder if that brat still has his treasure." Ling. Xiao Lingyu didn't know that the three rogue cultivators were also here. He had only booked an ordinary seat at the back, while the three of them were in a soundproof box that could block the vision and spiritual sense of cultivators. He was only talking to the little girl beside him. At the same time, he was looking forward to the auction starting as soon as possible so that he could leave as soon as possible after bidding for the items. The little girl's words were getting more and more ridiculous, making Xiao Lingyu a little nervous. He naturally didn't believe that the little girl was here specifically for him. However, there were always accidents. Cultivators in the cultivation world couldn't be looked at with the eyes of the secular world. 10 minutes after Xiao Lingyu entered the hall, the auction officially began. Without any nonsense, a female cultivator with a graceful figure and a beauty that was like a flower arrived at the auction platform at the front and started to auction the items one by one. It was Xiao Lingyu's first time participating in such an auction, so he was quite interested. Perhaps he didn't want to talk too much with the little girl beside him, so he kept staring at the beautiful hostess on the auction stage, seriously listening to the beautiful hostess introduce the treasures being auctioned. He was actually learning humbly, but the little girl beside him was a little unhappy. She kept pouting like a little wife who had been bullied. The materials Xiao Lingyu needed weren't very high grade, so the price wasn't very high. He bought 3 items at the price of 20, 35, and 40 high-grade spirit stones, respectively. The high-grade spirit stones that Gu Yunfei had given him had been used up. However, there was still a treasure that hadn't appeared yet. That treasure was one of the necessary materials for him to break through to the second revolution of the 9-revolution chaos formula. Since he saw it today, he had to get it. The first 3 materials were only suitable for cultivators below the severed soul stage. However, the last material was useful for body integration stage cultivators. Even if ordinary cultivators couldn't use it, the price wouldn't be too low. When the auction was about to end and the final item was about to be auctioned, The last treasure that Xiao Lingyu had his eyes on finally appeared. The next item is a special material that can be used to refine high-grade spirit pills. Cultivators above the nascent soul stage can use it directly. It has extraordinary effects. This material is... The beautiful hostess paused for a moment before gently waving her sleeves. A jade box appeared in front of her. She opened her mouth slightly and gently blew on it. A spiritual light swept over the jade box. The jade box slowly opened, and a red and blue light intertwined to form a multicolored light flashed. Then the beautiful host gently waved her hand, and a fruit that looked like a baby appeared in front of everyone's eyes. The fruit was about the size of a child's fist. It looked like a newborn baby with a smile on its face. However, its entire body shined with red and blue light. It was very mysterious. Dual-colored nascent soul fruit. Good stuff. Unfortunately, it should only be 1,000 years old and can't be considered a top-grade material. It can only be considered a high-grade material. Some cultivators who knew the value of the item couldn't help but discuss it. That's right. This is a 1,300-year-old dual-colored nascent soul fruit. Since everyone knows it, I won't introduce it. The dual-colored nascent soul fruit starts at 500 high-grade spirit stones. Each bid must be at least 50 high-grade spirit stones. Everyone, start bidding. The beautiful host said generously. 550, 600, 700, 850. The dual-colored nascent soul fruit was very popular and the price soared. In the blink of an eye, it broke through 1,000 high-grade spirit stones and was still rising. However, the number of cultivators bidding was also decreasing. 2,000 high-grade spirit stones. When the price stopped at 1,800 high-grade spirit stones, Xiao Lingyu couldn't help but shout. After shouting this, he unconsciously glanced at the little girl beside him. He originally thought that the other party would be surprised, but to Xiao Lingyu's disappointment, the other party's expression didn't change at all, and she still had a disinterested look. 2,200. Someone directly increased the price by 200. It seemed that he was determined to win. Xiao Lingyu could tell that the voice came from the box in front. The cultivators who could sit in the box were either rich or had a strong background. This was the usual practice of the auction. However, he also increased the price by 200. In the box, a cultivator in a Taoist robe said to the fat cultivator, "That kid is increasing the price. I think you should." "What? Do you think we're afraid of him? You know how important this dual-color nascent fruit is to me. Even if he finds us here, I'll still bid for it." The fat cultivator puffed out his cheeks as the 4 strands of black and white beard on his cheeks fluttered in the wind. 3,000 high-grade spirit stones. The fat cultivator seemed to be angry and increased the price by a large margin. "Brother Ba, you misunderstood. What I mean is that we still have to deal with that kid. Why don't we just let him bid for it, and then we can snatch it later?" The cultivator in the cloak explained. "That's right. Why didn't I think of that? This is bad. That kid isn't going to increase the price. I'm going to lose 3,000 upper-grade spirit stones for nothing." The fat cultivator patted his head and said with a pained expression, 3,200 high-grade spirit stones. Just as the fat cultivator was feeling vexed, Xiao Lingyu's voice rang out again. "Ha! This kid is too understanding. He saved me 3,000 high-grade spirit stones." The fat cultivator laughed. "I'll bid 5,000. The fat cultivator decisively decided not to increase the price, but someone else did. Moreover, the increase in price was even greater. The 3 rogue cultivators and Xiao Lingyu frowned at the same time. Even the little girl beside, Xiao Lingyu, seemed to be interested and looked over curiously. The person who increased the price was a young cultivator, but he was calmly waving his fan. He had delicate features, and no matter how one looked at him, he had the same air of a noble young master as Guyun Fei. "Who is this kid? Why does he look so unfamiliar?" The fat cultivator asked in astonishment. "What's so strange about that? The Feiyu continent is so big. How can we recognize all the elites? Don't be fooled by his handsome appearance. Maybe he's an old monster that has been in seclusion for many years." The cultivator in the Taoist robe said. I'm sure that this person isn't an elite from the Feiyu continent. The cultivator in the cloak said. Why? The fat cultivator and the cultivator in the Taoist robe asked in unison. Because he doesn't have any companions. Moreover, he's still so calm in this situation. He has a calm smile on his face. It's clear that he's experienced and has seen the world. However, it's also because of his expression that I'm sure he's not old, at least not as old as us. The cultivator in the cloak confidently analyzed, even though his analysis wasn't very reliable. After Xiao Lingyu glanced over, he only hesitated for a moment. In order to not have to worry about the dual-colored nascent fruit in the future, he could only bite the bullet and increase the price by 200 high-grade spirit stones. The other party smiled at Xiao Lingyu and increased the price by a large margin. The price tag was raised to 8,000 upper-level spirit stones. Xiao Lingyu bitterly smiled and increased the price by 200 high-grade spirit stones. The other party directly increased the price to 10,000 high-grade spirit stones. 10,000 high-grade spirit stones was equal to 100 top-grade spirit stones. This price was already a price that many severed soul experts would back off from. 12,000. Xiao Lingyu increased the price again. Chapter 22. The double-colored spiritual nascent fruit's base price was only 500 high-grade spirit stones, but at this moment, it was already worth more than 10,000 high-grade spirit stones. This caught everyone by surprise, and they began to wonder if one of the two bidders was deliberately raising the price. However, if they were deliberately raising the price, what if the one who genuinely wanted to bid for the fruit stopped due to lack of financial resources? Wouldn't the one who raised the price suffer the consequences of his own actions? Eldest niece, this is an auction, not a fit of pique. Doesn't it mean that every time you raise the price, you are magnanimous? If he directly bid 100,000 yuan for this dual-colored nascent fruit, do you think everyone will think that he is magnanimous and not crazy? Xiao Lingyu said snappily to the little girl. 12,000 high-grade spirit stones. The young cultivator waved his folding fan and raised the price again. Xiao Lingyu looked at his storage belt again and could only shake his head helplessly with a bitter smile. The spirit liquid he brought was already barely enough for 10,000 high-grade spirit stones, and he could not continue to raise the price. 12,000 high-grade spirit stones. Is there anyone else who wants to raise the price? After a while, the beautiful MC asked. She was still very happy in her heart, because this kind of price tag could allow her to get a large commission, because the final transaction price was much higher than the lowest price by too much. If there is no one else, then I would like to congratulate this young master for obtaining this double-colored 100,000 high-grade spirit stones. Before the beautiful MC could speak, a clear and sweet voice rang out. Whoosh! The whole place was filled with the sound of exasperation, and everyone was a little surprised. 10,000 high-grade spirit stones for a 1,000-year-old double-colored spiritual nascent fruit was already a sky-high price, and 100,000 high-grade spirit stones was simply too unbelievable. However, this kind of situation was actually very common at auctions. After all, there was the saying of fighting spirit. Once two rich cultivators got into a fit of pique, it was no longer a matter of spirit stones, but a matter of face. Moreover, 100,000 high-grade spirit stones was equivalent to 1,000 supreme-grade spirit stones, which was not much for many cultivators in the body integration stage. Damn, are you stupid? 100,000 high-grade spirit stones? You should think about it again. The person who called out the price was Xiao Lingyu's servant girl. She gave Xiao Lingyu a fright. I like it. What does it have to do with you? The little girl said, unconvinced. What a wastrel. Xiao Lingyu said hatefully. The young cultivator, who had been in high spirits and constantly raised the price by a large margin, now had a much gloomier expression. He narrowed his eyes and looked over. Moreover, he didn't conceal his tyrannical spiritual sense as he swept over. Spying on the bidders with one's spiritual sense at an auction was a taboo. It would cause dissatisfaction among the participants and the auction organizers. But the young cultivator didn't seem to care about this at all. How dare you? An old but vigorous voice resounded in the auction hall. An old man with white hair and beard wearing a white robe appeared on the auction stage out of thin air and stood beside the beautiful host. The old man narrowed his eyes and spoke with a dignified expression. Your Excellency is quite bold to ignore the rules of the Heaven Doe auction house. If you have the ability, then come and bid. If you want to show off, then you should first weigh your own strength. Hee. A mere auction house like the Heaven Doe auction house dares to talk nonsense about rules? What a joke. How can the Tai immortal sect, the 8-pole sword sect, and the black blood demon endure this? The young cultivator laughed without the slightest trace of fear. Xiaoling Yu had read many books in the study and listened to Jiang Lanhua talk about the cultivation world. When she heard the young cultivator's words, her expression changed slightly. The 3 sects that the young cultivator mentioned were all top-notch powers in the cultivation world. These 3 powers were virtually invincible in the cultivation world. The cultivators present were all knowledgeable individuals. The old man who had just appeared was naturally not a mediocre individual. Their reactions were even greater than Xiaoling Yu's. This was especially true for the old man. His aura had already weakened by 30% because of those words. The Heaven Doe auction house had some influence and power on the Flying Feather Continent and could be considered a first-rate clan in the cultivation world. But compared to the 3 top-notch powers, it was far too weak. May I ask who you are? The old man asked. I am merely a disciple of the Tai immortal sect's Taoist master Yi Pingzi, the young cultivator proudly said. As he spoke, in order to prove his identity, he even took out a token that was enveloped in golden light as soon as it appeared. The 2 words Tai were written on the token. So you're a fellow Taoist from the Tai immortal sect. My apologies. The old man cupped his fists and politely said those words before disappearing from the stage. It seemed that he was afraid of the other party's identity and had chosen to retreat. This was the first time such a situation had occurred at the Heaven Doe auction house. Disciples of top-notch powers like the Tai immortal sect rarely came to a remote and desolate place like the Flying Feather Continent. Hey, what are you dawdling for? If no one is going to raise the price, then hurry up and deliver the dual-colored nascent fruits to me. What was even more unexpected was that the little girl didn't show the slightest fear after hearing the other party's identity. Instead, she impatiently urged him on. 102,000 high-grade spirit stones. Since he had already announced his identity, the young cultivator wouldn't embarrass his sect. What a pretentious fellow. I bid 200,000. The little girl disdainfully said. Oof. I'd like to see how a little girl at the Golden Core stage can come up with 200,000 high-grade spirit stones. It wasn't that the young cultivator couldn't afford to raise the price, but if he did, it wouldn't be worth it. A pretty boy who has just advanced to the early stage of the body integration stage dares to pretend to be a master. The little girl retorted. Then, she shot a ray of light at the auction stage and said, Let's see if there are 200,000 high-grade spirit stones inside. The beautiful auctioneer caught the ray of light and revealed a ring. Could it be a storage ring? All the cultivators present were shocked. The price of a storage ring was far more than 200,000 high-grade spirit stones, not to mention anything else. But at this moment, everyone overlooked a problem. How could a little girl at the Golden Core stage see through someone who had just advanced to the early stage of the body integration stage? However, the young cultivator didn't overlook this problem. He cautiously looked at the little girl in surprise. There are no less than 1 million high-grade spirit stones in this storage ring. At this point, the beautiful host habitually paused for a moment. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Since there were 1 million high-grade spirit stones, it was naturally enough. There are no less than 1 million high-grade spirit stones. However, the beautiful auctioneer's next words silenced everyone. 1 million high-grade spirit stones wasn't that rich. Many of the cultivators present could afford it, but 1 million high-grade spirit stones was a huge number. Are you really at the Golden Core stage? Xiaoling Yu's first reaction was to ask the little girl such a question. It was probably the same question that all the cultivators present were asking. Why? Can't a Golden Core stage cultivator have 1 million high-grade spirit stones? The little girl asked. Xiao Yu and all the cultivators present had the urge to vomit blood. However, the young Tai immortal sect disciple's face was as ugly as a pig's liver. He thought that it was a great fortune to find the double-color nascent soul fruit here. He never expected to meet such a little girl. The beautiful auctioneer was in a dilemma. The old man's departure made it clear to her that this Tai immortal sect disciple couldn't be offended. However, this little girl didn't seem to be easy to deal with either. She hated that she didn't prepare 2 double-color nascent soul fruits. The young Tai immortal sect disciple didn't make things difficult for the beautiful auctioneer. After getting the answer, he left in a huff. The double-colored nascent soul fruit naturally belonged to the little girl. The auction continued. Xiao Yu didn't get the double-color nascent soul fruit and naturally lost interest. However, he wasn't too disappointed. After all, he was still a distance away from the chaotic nascent soul stage. He might be able to find other double-color nascent soul fruits in the future. He didn't expect the little girl to give him the double-color nascent soul fruit that cost 200,000 high-grade spirit stones. Even if the little girl gave the double-color nascent soul fruit to Xiao Yu, he wouldn't accept it. It wasn't that he was pretentious, but he couldn't see through the little girl. He didn't dare to accept her favor casually. Everything was easy to return, but favors were the hardest to return. Therefore, he left the auction house soon after, but the little girl didn't follow him out. It seems that she really didn't follow me on purpose. Xiao Yu shook his head and smiled after walking out of the auction house. Since the auction was over, his goal for this trip was more than half completed. Xiao Yu didn't immediately leave Taiyang City. Instead, he began to inquire about and continue to search for some materials for refining weapons or elixir pills. After 3 days, Xiao Yu was extremely disappointed that he didn't find any news about Earth, nor did he find any news about the other Earthlings who were moved to the Feiyu continent. This gave him a bad premonition. Could it be that he was the only one who was moved to the Feiyu continent, and the other Earthlings were moved to other cultivation continents? If that was really the case, Xiao Yu wanted to find his relatives and friends, who he didn't know if they were still alive, like a mortal searching for a needle in a haystack. Even the top experts in the cultivation world would frown and be troubled by this, let alone his current cultivation level. Xiao Yu, who had a lot on his mind, didn't realize that someone had been watching him for the past 3 days. The other party's cultivation level was far higher than his, so he couldn't detect that the other party was following him. After inquiring for another day, Xiao Yu finally headed to the city gate of Taiyang City, preparing to return to the herb garden to continue cultivating. However, just as he reached the city gate, he bumped into the little girl again. "Are you going out of the city?" the little girl asked Xiao Yu. "I know. You must be going out of the city too. Maybe we'll even go the same way," Xiao Yu said calmly. "You guessed it right," the little girl said, pretending to be surprised. Xiao Yu rolled his eyes, then asked straightforwardly, "Why are you always following me? You're so rich, so you definitely won't covet those lousy things in my storage belt." "Don't tell me you're coveting my beauty. Someone like you can call yourself beautiful, but if I really wanted to take advantage of you, what would you do?" The little girl showed a disdainful expression, then asked curiously. "I'll try to resist first," Xiao Yu said seriously after thinking for a while. "What if you can't resist?" the little girl continued asking. "Since I can't resist, then I'll just lie down and enjoy it," Xiao Yu replied with a smile, then strode out of the city. Chapter 23. After leaving the city, Xiao Yu naturally headed in the direction of the void inquiry stage. The little girl also followed him as if there was no one else around. "Is it really on the way?" Xiao Yu asked in a displeased tone. "Of course it's on the way. I'll go wherever you go," the little girl said with a smile. "Why are you following me on purpose?" Xiao Yu could not help but ask again. "I want to do a business with you," the little girl said while walking. "What business?" Xiao Yu was even more puzzled. "With your wealth, what do I have that you value?" "Hee, you naturally have something." The little girl smiled and said, "Then what kind of business do you want to do with me? Tell me now. It won't be too late for us to continue our journey after we finish our business." Xiaoling Yu said with an impatient look. Don't worry. There are people following you and me for the past few days. They are right behind us. It won't be too late for us to do our business after we get rid of them. The little girl shook her head and said, Someone is following us. Xiaoling Yu turned around in surprise. However, he did not see anything. There were too many cultivators at the city gate. He did not notice anyone's strange expression. Don't look around. Be careful not to scare them away. Their cultivation bases are far above yours. You can't see them at all. The little girl pulled Xiaoling Yu's arm and reminded him, You are definitely not at the Gold Core realm. Xiaoling Yu looked deeply at the little girl and said, Hee, no one can tell that I'm not at the Gold Core realm. No one can tell what level I am at. The little girl smiled with incomparable confidence. The two of them kept chatting and laughing. After traveling for a day, they were already 200 li asterisk, 500 Emperor Li, away from Taiyang City. They are here, the little girl suddenly said to Xiaoling Yu. As expected, 3 rays of light flew towards them from behind. In the blink of an eye, they blocked Xiaoling Yu and the little girl's path. Brat, we meet again. Last time, you were lucky. Let's see how you will escape this time. The fat cultivator's beard fluttered as he shouted. I advise you to get lost immediately. Otherwise, don't blame me for not warning you when you die. Xiaoling Yu sounded tough and seemed to be very confident, but she was not very confident in her heart. With just you 2 gold core stage brats? The cultivator wearing a Taoist robe asked with a smile. Release your big snake. I want to see if it has improved more than the 3 of us, the fat cultivator shouted, full of fighting spirit. You 2 talk too much. After the cloaked cultivator finished speaking, the cloak on his head flew out and spun like a spinning wheel towards Xiaoling Yu. The 3 people's Dharma treasures were destroyed by the big snake's dragon infant last time. However, they should have refined the same Dharma treasures in the past few years. It seemed to be stronger than before. Xiaoling Yu's eyes narrowed. He knew that he'd been locked onto firmly, and it was utterly impossible for him to escape. He was just about to mobilize his chaotic energy to resist when he noticed to his astonishment that his cloak had been forcefully grabbed by the little girl. The little girl's small hands were like fine white jade. They looked very tender and soft. She did not use any energy at all, but she was able to resist this kind of Dharma treasure. What kind of broken toy is this? The little girl sneered. Then, she squeezed her small hands lightly. It seemed like she did not use much strength, but the cloak immediately exploded into a cloud of black mist and was blown away by the strong wind. His Dharma treasure was destroyed, and the cultivator's mind was also severely injured. Immediately, his face turned pale, and he spat out blood. He shouted, Retreat! The fat cultivator and the cultivator in the Taoist robe also realized the power of the other party at the same time. They hurriedly tried to escape. Unfortunately, just as they were about to leave, the space around them fluctuated slightly. In the cultivation world, only those masters of the Deshang stage could make space fluctuate, and the fluctuating space could easily imprison the 3 rogue cultivators on the spot. You come and go as you please? Do you think I'm that easy to bully? The little girl walked in front of the 3 rogue cultivators and said, I won't take your lives. Leave your most important treasures to me, and I can let you go. Didn't you want to rob me? I'll let you have a taste of going for wool and coming home shorn. The 3 rogue cultivators knew that they had really hit an iron plate this time. They were certain that this little girl, who seemed to be only at the gold core stage, was actually a top master of the Deshang stage in the cultivation world. Hearing the little girl's request, they looked at each other with a depressed expression. Don't even think about trying to bluff your way out of this. Whether or not you can keep your little lives depends on whether or not you're honest. If you don't take the best treasure and make me angry, the little girl said with a threatening tone. The 3 rogue cultivators knew that what the little girl said was true. The 3 of them couldn't act shamelessly in front of a master of the Deshang stage. With a thought, a jade bottle appeared in front of them. In the 3 jade bottles, there was a small half bottle of golden liquid. The 10,000 years old queen bee nectar is indeed a good thing in the cultivation world. The little girl nodded with satisfaction. Then with a wave of her water sleeve, the 3 bottles of 10,000 years old queen bee nectar disappeared. Get lost. After you practice your skills, don't come out to fool around. After the little girl reprimanded, she waved her water sleeve again, and the 3 people disappeared out of thin air. You just used teleportation? Xiaoling Yu asked in surprise. Yes, but I didn't teleport them too far away. They're still on the Feiyu continent. The little girl said indifferently. Then can you teleport a large group of people from a planet to the Feiyu continent? Xiaoling Yu asked again, her expression a little nervous. Well, it depends on where it is. If it is in the cultivation world, it is naturally very simple, just a thought. Not to mention a large group of people. Even if it is a planet in the cultivation world, I can do it. The little girl said confidently. Are you in the Deshang stage? Xiaoling Yu asked again. Deshang stage? I can crush a large number of masters of the Deshang stage with one finger. Now that your tail has been cut off, we should do business. As the little girl said, she took out a few things, including the 3 bottles of 10,000 years old queen bee nectar and the 2-color spiritual infant fruit. She then said, I will use these treasures to exchange for something from you. What is it? Xiaoling Yu frowned and asked. She didn't seem to have anything on her that could be exchanged for these treasures. A short knife that is broken in 2. It is called Silver Moon, the little girl said. Hearing this, Xiaoling Yu's eyelids immediately twitched a few times, and she took a few steps back vigilantly. I came from the God realm, and my realm is countless times higher than yours, so you don't have to hide it. I know that the 2 halves of Silver Moon are on you. Silver Moon is my sister's favorite magic weapon. She left in a hurry and forgot to take it back. After she returned home, she was locked up, so she told me to find some time to come down here. However, the difference between me and my sister is that she secretly came down, and I got my father's permission. The little girl explained. So you were from the God realm. No wonder you are so powerful. Are all the masters in the God realm so powerful? Xiaoling Yu nodded first and then asked. Not really. There are powerful and not powerful people in the God realm. You will know one day when you go to the God realm. The little girl calmly replied. How can you prove your identity? Xiaoling Yu asked worriedly. Do I need to prove it to you? I know that Silver Moon is on you, and I am many times stronger than you. If I want to take Silver Moon, I don't need your permission. However, my sister said that you are her friend, so I took a roundabout way to do business with you. The little girl said with a smile. You should prove it. How can an old friend's things be so easily handed over to someone else? Even if I'm not your opponent, if you cannot prove your identity, at least I will not give it to you. It will be the same even if you kill me. Xiaoling Yu said unyieldingly. In fact, he was very nervous. He guessed that the little girl would not use force. If she wanted to use force, she would have used it long ago. When the little girl heard Xiaoling Yu's words, although she admired him, she said, You are a bit stubborn. To us, cultivators, what is more important than our lives? Without our lives, everything is empty. But fortunately, my sister knows your temper and gave me a way to prove myself. The little girl paused, then said as if she was chanting a spell, Bye-bye. Hearing these 2 words, Xiaoling Yu's heart relaxed. Although the little girl's words were a bit clumsy, they did prove some things. She came from the God realm, knew about Jianglan Yue, knew about Silver Moon, and could easily find him. There was no need to doubt her identity. Xiaoling Yu reluctantly took out the 2 halves of the Silver Moon dagger and then carefully handed it to the little girl. He said, It's returned to its rightful owner, so there's no need to exchange it with any treasures. The little girl took the 2 pieces and said, These things could be considered treasures in the cultivation world, but to me, they are worthless. You should keep them. I can get them by myself in the future. Xiaoling Yu said, I was just saying that you are a stubborn person. Whether you accept it or not, I will keep them anyway. After saying that, the little girl's body gradually turned illusory and eventually disappeared into thin air. It gave Xiaoling Yu a feeling that it was just a dream. Xiaoling Yu glanced around and did not see the little girl. Then, he heaved a long sigh of relief. However, what he did not expect was that the little girl only took half of the dagger and left the other half here. He did not think too much about it. However, he was afraid that the 3 rogue cultivators would come again. So he kept the dagger and the 3 bottles of 10,000 years old king bee nectar. Then, he aimed at the direction of the void inquiry stage and flew at full speed. He was not an idiot. The reason why he said those words just now was to leave a good impression on them, so that the people of the God realm would not look down on him. Since they were so sincere, he also reluctantly accepted it. After Xiao Lingyu flew away, the little girl appeared again. She smiled at the place where Xiao Lingyu's back disappeared and then disappeared again. When the little girl appeared again, she was high up in the sky. Not far from her, the disciple of the Tai, immortal sect, seemed very surprised. I have to say that you are very unlucky. The little girl smiled at the young disciple of the Tai, immortal sect. Then, she waved her hand and a ray of colorful light wrapped around the young disciple. Chapter 24. One day later, Xiao Lingyu, who was running at full speed, arrived at the entrance of the valley where the herb garden was located. As soon as he landed, he saw a middle-aged cultivator in blue robes pacing back and forth at the entrance of the valley. Judging from his expression, he seemed to be in a hurry. Moreover, that cultivator would send a ray of spiritual light into the restriction formation at the entrance of the valley from time to time, as if he was deliberately alerting the people inside. After Xiao Lingyu left, there were no living people in the valley at all. Thus, no one came out to greet that cultivator. When Xiao Lingyu landed, that cultivator came forward to greet him. "Are you the disciple on duty in this herb garden?" That cultivator narrowed his eyes and asked in a slightly angry tone. You can say so." Xiao Lingyu paused for a while and answered, "Since you're the disciple on duty, how can you leave the herb garden as you please? I remember that there are 3 outer sect disciples on duty in this herb garden. Where are the other 2? After that cultivator got the answer, he became even more furious. He was just short of pointing his finger at Xiao Lingyu's nose and scolding him. Xiao Lingyu was indeed unable to react to such a fierce attack. He was at a loss of what to do. The most hateful thing is that it's fine if you sneak out, but you actually sneak out when it's time to hand in the mature medicinal herbs. If this matter is known by the discipline hall, you could just wait to pack up and get lost. That cultivator should have waited for too long, as he was a little angry. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and bring me in. You guys want to enter the inner sect of my void, inquiry, immortal sect to cultivate with such an attitude? You guys are really delusional. Xiao Lingyu more or less understood that he was arranged to stay here by Gu Yunfei. This cultivator in front of him certainly did not know about it. However, he did not expect that instead of Gu Yunfei, such a person would come. Xiao Lingyu also did not want to cause trouble, especially not for Gu Yunfei. Thus, he took out the token cooperatively and entered the formation and restriction formation. That cultivator followed him and asked curiously, "Is this Martial Uncle GE's token?" Xiao Lingyu nodded and answered, "He left it for me before he left. It seems like Martial Uncle Gu took good care of you. No wonder. You have already reached the Gold Core realm. It's just a matter of time before you enter the inner sect. However, even if Martial Uncle Gu took care of you, you still can't leave the herb garden as you please." That cultivator followed Xiao Lingyu in the formation, like a senior expert, was lecturing Xiao Lingyu. Xiao Lingyu pretended that he didn't hear anything. From time to time, he would reply with a perfunctory "Are you listening to me or not?" Xiao Lingyu's reaction. Xiao Lingyu's SS to the garden was to say Xiao, to Xiao Lingyu and Xiao Lingyu, Xiao Lingyu and Xiao Lingyu, to Xiao and to the Xiao Lingyu and was and Xiao Li and to be to Qi. You don't know? Be Xiao ing to it. To Xiao Lingen to the Xiao to the tes. And Xiao. I don't know. Aren't you here to collect the mature herbs? There are some in the storehouse and some in the garden. Go collect them, Xiao Lingyu replied coldly. He hated people who thought too highly of themselves. After he finished speaking, Xiao Lingyu flung his sleeves and prepared to leave. I won't even give a damn about you. Wait, that person shouted. Then, he released the aura of an expert, which immediately shrouded Xiao Lingyu. Don't think that just because Martial Uncle Ge likes you, you can intimidate others. There are some things that I shouldn't tell an outer sect disciple like you. However, seeing how fearless you are, I'll tell you. Martial Uncle Ge hasn't been here for a while, right? When Shaolin Yu heard this, he immediately stopped and turned around to ask, what else? That person continued, Martial Uncle Ge violated the Immortal Sect's rules 2 years ago and was locked up by the sect master. He said that he can't come out until he reaches the body integration stage or 1,000 years. Do you still expect him to support you? Shaolin Yu felt relieved. He thought that something big had happened to Ge Yunfei, but it turned out that he was just locked up. For a severed soul stage expert like Ge Yunfei, being locked up for 1,000 years might be an opportunity for him to calm down and work hard. Shaolin Yu didn't have anything to worry about. Shaolin Yu had never thought of asking Ge Yunfei to support him. After all, Ge Yunfei could support him for a while, but he couldn't support him for a lifetime. If there were no accidents, he still had a long way to go after cultivating the 9 Revolution Chaos formula. It was unreliable to rely on others. He had to rely on himself for everything. Looking at Shaolin Yu walking away once again, that person seemed a little flustered and exasperated. However, he didn't do anything excessive. In any case, Shaolin Yu was a void inquiry stage disciple who was about to enter the inner sect. Moreover, he seemed to have a good relationship with Ge Yunfei. Thus, he didn't dare to offend him easily. Shaolin Yu's indifferent attitude also made that person feel that he must have something he could rely on. Sometimes, when you show off your strength, it could indeed make people who wanted to bully you shrink back. That person first went to the storehouse to keep the medicinal herbs that he had collected and preserved. After that, he went to the medicinal garden. He was a member of the storehouse department of the Void Inquiry stage. Theoretically speaking, the medicinal gardens of the Void Inquiry stage were supervised by the storehouse department. After that, they would be assigned to some elite disciples to manage. The storehouse would hope that the harvest of each medicinal garden would be very good. Of course, as a disciple of the Void Inquiry stage, everyone would want their harvest to be better. Therefore, that person naturally wouldn't let go of the matured medicinal herbs in the medicinal garden. Originally, this task should be done by the 3 outer sect disciples who were on duty. He only needed to find a place to drink some tea and wait. However, the situation in this medicinal garden was a little troublesome. Unfortunately, he didn't have much time to wait here. Thus, he could only do it himself. When I return, I will definitely go to the discipline hall and report you all for neglecting your duties. So what if you were at the Gold Core realm? So what if you have Martial Uncle Ge's support? When the time comes, you will still have to get lost from this grandpa's sight. That person cursed in his heart as he began to get busy in the medicinal garden. After working for less than the time it takes to finish a cup of tea, that person suddenly noticed something unusual. Then he took out his spiritual herb shovel and began to dig in the medicinal garden. Not long after, that person actually dug out a big hole in the medicinal garden. In the big hole, he found 3 corpses. Among the 3 corpses, one of them was severed into a few pieces. Another one was decapitated. Only one of the corpses looked normal. As for these 3 corpses, they were buried in a place with abundant spiritual chi. They didn't rot, and one could still vaguely see their faces. It's actually these 3 people. That person used to come to the medicinal garden once every 2 to 3 years. Naturally, he recognized Wang Ziqing and the other 2. When he saw Shaolin Yu just now, he thought that one of the 3 had been replaced. Or perhaps all 3 of them had been replaced. Never would he have thought that all 3 of them were already dead and their corpses were buried here. What is going on? That person was extremely confused after being shocked. After thinking quickly, he immediately went to call Shaolin Yu over. Since there was someone here, Shaolin Yu naturally wouldn't run off to cultivate. Instead, he waited in a thatched cottage. When that person called him, his expression was still very calm. However, when he walked to the big hole and glanced into the big hole, he was suddenly shocked. He secretly thought that he was too careless. Originally, he thought that he had buried them deep enough and wouldn't be discovered. However, he underestimated the spiritual perception of cultivators. If he had known that he would be discovered, he would definitely have burned all 3 corpses with fire. However, paper couldn't wrap fire. Even if he destroyed the corpses and destroyed the evidence, in the future, people would discover that Wang Ziqing and the other 2 were dead. At that time, he would still be suspected. "You killed the 3 of them, right?" that person asked. "That's right." Xiao Lingyu directly admitted it first, then explained the situation at that time. "You said that they wanted to take your life, but you resisted and killed them. However, do you have any evidence to prove it?" That person began to interrogate him. Moreover, he had already released his aura and sealed off the surroundings. From the other person's aura, Xiao Lingyu could determine that the other person was a nascent soul cultivator. His strength was definitely not inferior to his own. However, he couldn't produce any evidence at all. This was because a few years had already passed, and there were no witnesses at that time. "You said that they coveted your spirit stones. If you can produce some spirit stones, I won't directly kill you. Instead, I'll hand you over to the discipline hall to investigate this matter. After all, even if you're an outer sect disciple, the immortal sect won't ignore your life and death," that person said in a seemingly impartial manner. Xiao Lingyu was in a difficult situation again. Previously, he did have a lot of spirit stones that Gu Yunfei gave him in his storage pouch. However, he had already spent all of them in Taiyang City. Moreover, his spiritual liquid was something that couldn't be exposed to the public. Thus, it couldn't be used as evidence. That person frowned. The corner of his mouth also contained a cold smile. Originally, he wanted to make Xiao Lingyu hand over the spirit stones and then take him away by saying that they were evidence. However, it seemed like his plan was not going to work out. "You're not a disciple of our void inquiry stage. However, you killed our disciples in our territory." "Humph. As a member of the void inquiry stage, I have the right and the obligation." "Why? Do you want to kill me?" Xiao Lingyu asked straightforwardly. "Your crime is unforgivable." That person had been tolerating Xiao Lingyu for a long time. Regardless of whether it was Xiao Lingyu who did not like him in the past, or the fact that Xiao Lingyu killed his fellow disciples, he had every reason to attack Xiao Lingyu, who was not a member of the Void Inquiry stage. After saying that, that person's aura force surged again. Waves of aura force wrapped tightly around Xiao Lingyu, like a gust of wind. Then, that person pounced towards Xiao Lingyu with a hideous smile on his face. His palm was aimed at Xiao Lingyu's head. From his point of view, Xiao Lingyu was just a gold core realm cultivator. Even though he could not see through Xiao Lingyu's cultivation base, he could confirm this point based on the fluctuation of Xiao Lingyu's qi. Xiao Lingyu let out a soft cry. The primal chaos golden core in his dantian immediately shone brightly. A wave of grayish primal chaos energy suddenly enveloped his entire body, forming a circle of primal chaos defensive barrier. With a loud bang, the primal chaos defensive barrier shook violently and exploded. Xiao Lingyu's body was sent flying far away. Chapter 25. Xiao Lingyu retreated more than 10 meters before stopping. His body smashed into the ground, and he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood along the way. He had just advanced to the Golden Core stage, and his strength was enough to deal with Golden Core stage cultivators. However, he was still not a match for a nascent Soul stage cultivator. If not for the fact that the quality of the chaotic energy was higher, the opponent's palm strike would have taken his life. Xiao Lingyu actually did not suffer too much damage. However, because the strength of the opponent's palm strike was too strong and he was not prepared, his blood and qi were shaken, and he spat out a few mouthfuls of blood. He circulated his energy and suppressed his surging blood and qi. Then, he stood up straight and looked fearlessly at the cultivator who was slowly walking towards him. At the same time, there was a contemptuous smile on his face. If you can end your own life, perhaps you can die a more comfortable death. That person stopped 7 or 8 meters away and said with a relaxed expression, "If you leave now, perhaps I can forget about your palm strike just now." Xiao Lingyu wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and replied in the same tone. "Stubborn." As that person spoke, his feet suddenly stomped on the ground. With the aura of a nascent soul stage cultivator, he pressed down on Xiaolingyu. The opponent's speed was much faster than Xiaolingyu's. Xiaolingyu did not cultivate any special movement techniques, so he did not dodge. With a thought, the golden shield talisman treasure expanded and shone with a golden light, blocking in front of him. That person's palm strike landed on the golden shield talisman treasure, but he was rebounded back a few steps. So you have such a talisman treasure to protect you. No wonder you dare to speak so arrogantly. However, the difference in cultivation level is not something that can be made up for with 1 or 2 treasures. As that person spoke, he opened his mouth and spat out a ray of light. The ray of light expanded in the wind and turned into a flying sword that overflowed with flames. Go! That person lightly shouted, and the flying sword flew forward. Just as it was about to come into contact with the golden shield, it suddenly changed direction. With a flash, it actually pierced towards Xiaolingyu from the side. Xiaolingyu wanted to move the golden shield talisman treasure to block it, but it was already too late. The speed at which a nascent soul cultivator changed moves was many times faster than Wang Zhiqing and the other Foundation Establishment cultivators. Xiaolingyu, who was only at the golden core stage, simply couldn't react in time. However, Xiaolingyu held a long sword and slashed at the flying sword. Xiaolingyu's long sword cracked into several pieces as soon as it met the flying sword. The quality of the sword was not high, and a long sword that had not been refined could not withstand a single blow from the flying sword. The web between Xiaolingyu's thumb and index finger was also split open. Her palm was dripping with blood, and she staggered a few steps to the side. The golden shield talisman treasure followed closely behind Xiaolingyu. When the flying sword attacked again, it was firmly blocked by it. However, the attack of the flying sword caused the golden shield talisman treasure to pause for a moment. Then, another ray of light was spat out from that person's mouth and turned into a metal seal that smashed toward Xiaolingyu. At the same time, that person continuously formed seals with his hands. When the metal seal whistled out, he shouted loudly. A fire dragon that was released from the seal brought with it scorching heat and berserk power. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it meandered through the air. This was a set of combined attacks: flying sword, metal seal, and fire dragon. Relying on this set of attacks that he had practiced countless times, he had defeated many nascent soul cultivators. He was confident that he could easily kill a slightly special golden core cultivator. The flying sword stopped the golden shield talisman treasure, and the powerful and heavy metal seal directly smashed the golden shield talisman treasure to the side. The fire dragon that had been waiting in the air for a moment swooped down from the sky. Not to mention how strong the impact of the fire dragon was. Just the scorching heat that it brought with it was enough to burn Xiaolingyu's body into charcoal. Seeing that the fire dragon had already swooped down on Xiaolingyu's head, that cultivator's sinister smile deepened. In his heart, he silently said, "Go to hell." This kind of seal attack from a nascent soul cultivator was difficult to block even for another nascent soul cultivator. A mere golden core cultivator, without the protection of a magic treasure, would not be able to escape death. Xiaolingyu used all his strength to summon the chaotic energy to form a defensive shield to protect his body. At the same time, he clenched one hand into a fist and summoned all the energy in his body to fiercely punch upwards. Just as his fist was about to collide with the fire dragon, a wave of gray, chaotic energy gushed out and met the fire dragon. The formation of the fire dragon was actually the condensation of that cultivator's fire-type spiritual energy. The quality of spiritual energy was not as good as the chaotic energy, so when it was hit by such an impact, the fire dragon's head directly collapsed into a sky full of flames. However, the spells of a nascent soul cultivator were indeed very powerful. After the fire dragon's head was destroyed, it swung its divine dragon tail toward Xiaolingyu. Waves of scorching flames rushed toward Xiaolingyu and broke through Xiaolingyu's chaotic defensive shield. The raging flames swept across Xiaolingyu's body. A piercing pain came from all over his body. Xiaolingyu felt as if his entire body was soaked in boiling water. His brain was buzzing, making him feel dizzy. Bang! In the end, Xiaoling Yu's body could not hold on and directly fell to the ground. Seeing his opponent fall to the ground, his entire body charred and emitting black smoke, the cultivator revealed a proud smile. It had been a long time since he defeated an enemy like this. He really missed this feeling of excitement and accomplishment. Although his opponent was only in the golden core stage, his indifferent expression made him feel a sense of satisfaction because he felt that his opponent must be regretting offending him. To be cautious, the cultivator did not directly approach him. Instead, he prepared to use his metal seal to smash his opponent into a pile of mush. However, he saw the storage belt at his opponent's waist. He was afraid that the metal seal would destroy the storage belt and waste the treasures in the belt. Therefore, he carried his flying sword and approached him. The metal seal was still hanging above Xiaoling Yu's head. As long as he made the slightest move, the metal seal would fall at any time and smash him into a meat patty. The cultivator was indeed a cautious person. He had a lot of combat experience and knew that when fighting with cultivators, the slightest mistake could lead to eternal damnation. Therefore, even though Xiaoling Yu had fallen and obviously lost his ability to fight, he still used his spiritual energy to form a circle of flaming protective shield. However, when he was 5 meters away from Xiaoling Yu, the twitching Xiaoling Yu, who was originally lying on the ground, suddenly jumped up and rushed towards him. In the blink of an eye, he was right in front of him. He originally wanted the metal seal to smash down, but the other party was with him. If the metal seal smashed down, it would also hurt him. Therefore, he waved his flying sword and stabbed it. Although he did not use his spiritual energy to strengthen the flying sword, such a sharp weapon was enough to injure his opponent again. Xiaoling Yu did not dodge and allowed the flying sword to pierce through his body. Then, he stabbed toward the other party's arm that was holding the sword. The cultivator did not realize that Xiaoling Yu was holding a silver needle in his hand. The needle easily pierced through the spiritual energy defense on his arm and pierced into his arm. Instantly, the spiritual energy shield around the cultivator's body collapsed. His spiritual energy also stopped circulating and quickly dissipated. Bang! 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 Xiaoling Yu, the cultivator, and the metal seal fell to the ground at the same time. Enduring the intense pain, Xiaoling Yu took out a bottle of spirit liquid. He first took a small sip and then rubbed it on his body. The spirit liquid was very effective in healing injuries. In just 10 minutes, Xiaoling Yu shed a layer of black skin and his skin returned to normal. It was even smoother than before. His clothes were gone. First, he jumped into a nearby pond to wash his body. Then, he took out a long robe from his storage belt and put it on. Only then did he walk towards the cultivator. Everything that happened just now could be said to have been directed by him. The flaming dragon's tail could not burn him to such a miserable state, nor could it make him lose his ability to fight. He just wanted to make the cultivator think that the battle was over and that he was on the verge of death without any ability to resist. When the cultivator came closer, he would launch a sneak attack. This was something that could not be helped. Even though he knew that the cultivator would be cautious and use the metal seal to smash him again, he had to take the risk. This was because if he fought the cultivator with real swords and spears, there was no chance of him winning. What Xiaoling Yu did not expect was that the cultivator's life force had already been cut off and he was completely dead. The cultivator was only at the nascent soul stage and could not be compared to the snake that had been pierced by the silver needle. The snake had managed to hold on for a period of time, but that did not mean that the cultivator could do the same. Xiaoling Yu shook his head and heaved a sigh. He kept the silver needle and looked at the cultivator's corpse, muttering to himself for a long time. At the end of the day, the reason why the cultivator dared to attack him was because he was stronger than him. If he was stronger, he would not dare to attack him even if he scolded or beat him, let alone being a little colder to him. This once again proved to Xiaoling Yu that in the cultivation world, everything depended on one's strength. I can't stay here for long. This guy is a nascent soul cultivator and also an inner sect disciple of the Void Inquiry stage. The news of his death will certainly spread to the void inquiry stage very soon. I reckon it won't be long before they find this place. While thinking, Xiaoling Yu took action to deal with the nascent soul cultivator's corpse and the corpses of Wang Jiqing and the other two. Gu Yunfei had already been confined in seclusion. It was estimated that he would not be able to come out for many years. It would be meaningless for him to continue staying in the void inquiry stage. Xiaoling Yu also did not have much reluctance to leave. However, before he left, he still made a trip to the spiritual liquid pond. Before he went to Taiyang City, Xiaoling Yu had obtained quite a lot of jade bottles to store spiritual liquid. He did not hold back and simply stored all the spiritual liquid in the spiritual liquid pond into the jade bottles. However, just as he was about to leave, he discovered that the stalagmite in the middle of the pond was a little strange. He once again went to the bottom of the spiritual liquid pond and carefully observed the bottom of the stalagmite. It turned out that there were some very small words carved at the bottom of the stalagmite. If it was not for the fact that the spiritual liquid in the pond had been emptied and he did not look at it carefully, it would be really difficult to discover the existence of these small words. Obviously, these small words were carved by someone. This also proved that there were other cultivators who had come here before Xiaoling Yu arrived. Xiaoling Yu could not help but think of Gu Yunfei. However, he shook his head after a second and recalled Gu Yunfei's martial uncle who had already passed away. Chapter 26. Engraved at the bottom of the stalagmite was a cultivation technique. However, this cultivation technique was somewhat peculiar. In Xiaoling Yu's opinion, this cultivation technique belonged to a certain cultivator's whimsical idea. Theoretically speaking, it was possible to cultivate it. However, achieving success with it was incomparably difficult. However, no matter what, a cultivator who could come up with such a strange cultivation technique was definitely extremely talented and had a profound understanding of cultivation. Xiaoling Yu did not know who this person was. The small words were not signed, but Xiaoling Yu guessed that it was most likely Gu Yunfei's martial uncle. The name of this cultivation method was body and soul transformation. Body naturally referred to the cultivator's physical form, which could also be said to be the body, while spirit referred to the cultivator's mind, which could also be said to be the cultivator's soul. As the name implied, body and soul transformation was a cultivation technique that could improve the cultivator's soul and body at the same time. In the cultivation world, there were many cultivation techniques that specialized in cultivating the soul or body, but there were very few that could do both at the same time. Even if one only focused on one aspect, this kind of cultivation technique was more precious than other cultivation techniques. However, body and soul transformation was created by a cultivator. Compared to those ordinary cultivation techniques that have been researched and improved by countless people, it lacked completeness and detail, and even more so, it lacked security. In terms of cultivation techniques, cultivators would not allow themselves to cultivate too many cultivation techniques. This was because any cultivation technique required a lot of time to comprehend and cultivate. It was already very difficult for cultivators to cultivate a single cultivation technique to the extreme, so how could they talk about increasing the burden on themselves? It was not necessarily a good thing for a cultivator to have a variety of cultivation methods. Usually, cultivators would only cultivate one mainline cultivation method. For cultivators in the cultivation world, the mainline cultivation method was a method to continuously increase one's strength, while some seals, restrictions, formations, and alike were auxiliary cultivation methods. Body and soul transformation was between the main cultivation technique and the auxiliary cultivation technique. It had the flexible characteristics of the auxiliary cultivation technique, but it also had the advantage of being able to continuously improve like the main cultivation technique. Although it did not directly affect the main cultivation technique or the auxiliary cultivation technique, it would have a great impact. For example, a stronger body could increase the amount of energy that the body could hold and withstand the impact of the energy. Naturally, the speed of the energy circulation in the body would be faster. This would naturally be of great help to the main cultivation technique. For example, a stronger soul could improve a cultivator's comprehension and understanding ability. It could strengthen a cultivator's precise control of energy, and it could also allow a cultivator to cast some spells faster. This would definitely have an immeasurable effect on the auxiliary cultivation technique. There were advantages and disadvantages to it. First of all, cultivating the body and soul transformation required a very long time. Without any experience or guidance from any seniors, cultivating both the body and the soul at the same time was a great challenge to a cultivator's cultivation speed. Secondly, the cultivation of this cultivation technique was very dangerous. Every transformation was like walking through the gates of hell. If one was not careful, either the physical body would collapse or the soul would be annihilated. Moreover, one would often encounter the dangerous situation of chi deviation. This was because the method to improve the soul was really a bit abnormal. Thirdly, cultivating this cultivation technique required the support of a lot of cultivation materials. Many of these materials were not commonly seen in the cultivation world. Many of them could only be obtained by spending a lot of money. This also had an extremely high requirement for the cultivator's wealth. Even if an ordinary cultivator obtained this cultivation technique, they would not be able to afford to cultivate it. This was similar to the cultivation world. There were many cultivators who had talent in refining tools or alchemy, but they did not have enough spirit stones to purchase the materials for refining tools or alchemy. They did not have enough opportunities to practice and practice. In the end, they were unable to become a grandmaster in refining tools or alchemy. These 3 points were only the more important disadvantages, but they were not all. This cultivation technique was created by a cultivator based on his own experience and understanding. There were bound to be many problems. If this cultivation technique was really created by Gu Yunfei's martial uncle, it's better if I don't cultivate it. That old fellow is already dead. Even he, the creator, was unable to successfully cultivate it. If I were to cultivate it, I would just be courting death. Xiaoling Yu thought for a long time before concluding to herself. In any case, every time a cultivator improved, their soul realm and physical body would correspondingly improve. Why should she take the risk? However, Xiaoling Yu still memorized this cultivation technique as a form of respect for the cultivator who created this cultivation technique. It was unknown whether it was out of selfishness or other considerations, but when Xiaoling Yu was about to leave this dried-up spiritual liquid pond, he smashed the stalagmite into pieces so that no one would know about this cultivation technique. Xiaoling Yu left this medicinal garden. When he was about to leave, he was more or less reluctant. After all, he had stayed here for more than 3 years and even obtained some benefits from this place. However, he knew that he had to leave. Otherwise, the one waiting for him might not necessarily be a nascent soul realm cultivator. However, Xiaoling Yu still underestimated the reaction speed of the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect. When he was about to enter the formation that protected the entire valley, he felt the formation trembling continuously. He knew that someone was shaking the formation outside. Only now did he suddenly remember that any large sect would leave behind a soul jade plate for their disciples or members. If they died outside, their soul jade plate would shatter. In other words, when that nascent soul realm cultivator was killed by Xiaoling Yu, the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect had already received the news. However, they could not confirm where that nascent soul realm cultivator died. Even so, they could investigate it. The people in the storehouse of the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect knew that the nascent soul realm cultivator went to each of the spiritual medicinal gardens to collect the mature medicinal herbs. Therefore, they could investigate the spiritual medicinal gardens one by one. Naturally, they could find this place very quickly. Of course, they could not confirm that the nascent soul realm cultivator died here. Outside the valley, there were a few disciples of the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect waiting. They had been shaking the formation for quite some time, but did not receive any response. Naturally, they had reasons to suspect this medicinal garden. They also knew that there should only be 3 foundation establishment realm cultivators in this medicinal garden. However, It was impossible for 3 Foundation Establishment Realm cultivators to kill a nascent soul realm expert. Therefore, they felt that there should be external enemies invading this place. Under the situation where they did not know the strength and number of the enemies, they summoned many of their fellow disciples. Around the entire valley, there would be one or a few disciples of the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect keeping an eye on the surroundings at certain intervals. It could be said that the entire valley had been surrounded. Body Integration Realm experts were all elders in the Void Inquiry Stage. Naturally, they would not interfere in such a trivial matter. Even among the Severed Spirit Realm experts, there was only one early Severed Spirit Realm expert who came. After all, there were too many disciples in the Void Inquiry Stage. It was only a nascent Soul Realm disciple who was killed. Xiao Yu looked at the huge snake in his spiritual beast pouch again. His expression seemed a little depressed. Even though the formations and restrictions here were of a high level, it was definitely not a long-term solution for him to hide in this valley. Besides, the longer he delayed, the more difficult it would be to solve this matter. Naturally, he would not expect that the experts of the Void Inquiry Stage would not be able to find out the truth. Therefore, his only choice was to brace himself and rush out. With no other choice, Xiao Yu could only release the huge snake from his spiritual beast pouch. Even though this long worm did not show any signs of waking up, he had no choice but to wake it up by force. Even though it would cause some damage to the snake, it was still better than losing both his and the snake's lives. It was actually very easy to wake up the huge snake. Due to the fact that the snake had recognized him as its master, Xiao Yu and the huge snake's minds were connected. He only needed a single thought to disperse the soul of the huge snake. Naturally, he could wake it up. However, he needed to shake the soul of the huge snake a little. The vibration could not be too strong or too light. Xiao Yu hesitated for a long time, but still chose to shake the soul of the huge snake. It was very light. However, the huge snake's body only twitched a little. It was still in a state of slumber. Xiao Yu hardened his heart and slightly increased the intensity of the vibration. However, this caused the huge snake to fly up and let out an earth-shattering dragon's roar. At the same time, a vast and mighty dragon's aura of anger spread down. Even though Xiao Yu was its master, he was still scared out of his wits. The ferocious-looking huge snake opened its bloody mouth and looked as if it was about to swallow someone whole. It really made one's scalp go numb. Through telepathy, Xiao Yu explained the situation to the huge snake. Only then did the huge snake land steadily. However, it was as if it had not slept well and was very weak. After its body landed, it continuously spat out a few mouthfuls of snake blood. Xiao Yu's soul tremor when the huge snake was unprepared caused the huge snake soul to suffer quite a bit of damage. However, the huge snake did not dare to do anything to Xiao Yu because of this. It just looked a little resentful. Since the huge snake had already woken up, things were much easier to handle. Xiao Yu took Yunfei's command token and rushed out from the back of the valley, ignoring the entire formation. There were 3 nascent Soul Realm cultivators from the Void Inquiry Stage at the back of the valley. When they saw Xiao Yu standing on the back of the huge snake and rushing out, they quickly went forward to stop him. However, they were all sent flying by the huge snake's forked tongue. If Xiao Yu had not told the huge snake not to kill people, the huge snake's forked tongue could definitely take away the lives of those nascent Soul Realm cultivators. If those nascent Soul Realm cultivators wanted to stop the huge snake, it was naturally like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. By the time the other cultivators from the Void Inquiry Stage arrived, the huge snake had already brought Xiao Yu and disappeared without a trace. However, the 3 nascent Soul Realm cultivators from the Void Inquiry Stage who were attacked by the huge snake still managed to see Xiao Yu's appearance. They used their own spiritual power to cast an illusion technique, showing the appearances of the huge snake and Xiao Yu in a very vivid manner. Xiao Yu was actually very clear that he would definitely be hunted down and wanted by the Void Inquiry Stage. However, he did not have too many negative emotions. At most, he just felt a little sorry for Gu Yunfei. After all, Gu Yunfei was kind enough to let him stay here. However, he had caused such a big trouble. The severed spirit realm cultivator from the void inquiry stage also chased after the huge snake for a while. However, he did not manage to catch up with the huge snake, nor could he find any trace of it. Thus, he could only return helplessly. The entire void inquiry stage did not know about Xiao Lingyu's existence. They only thought that Xiao Lingyu was a thief who trespassed into the herb garden. However, what made them feel very strange was that the formations and restrictions of the herb garden were not destroyed. Obviously, the thief could enter and leave freely without any restrictions. In that case, either he had very high attainments in formations and restrictions which allowed him to ignore the formations and restrictions set up by severed spirit realm experts, or he had a token and the only person who had a token was Gu Yunfei. They did not link this matter to Gu Yunfei. After all, Gu Yunfei had been locked up for 2 years. Therefore, they felt that the thief should be a formation Dao expert. The huge snake flew for more than 4 hours. It even flew past Haiyang City and stopped at a small mountain range that Xiao Lingyu did not know about. Looking at the huge snake's dispirited appearance, Xiao Lingyu first took out a bottle of spiritual liquid and then a bottle of 10,000 years old jade queen bee nectar. Chapter 27. At the foot of a huge mountain, Xiao Lingyu and the huge snake stopped. After the huge snake landed, it gulped down a bottle of spiritual liquid and a bottle of 10,000-year-old king bee nectar. It even stuck out its tongue and licked its mouth like a gluttonous child. Xiao Lingyu also drank a few mouthfuls of the spiritual liquid to nourish his body. Although he had the huge snake as his companion, Xiao Lingyu still felt a little lonely. He was all alone in this flying feather continent. He had just found a brother, but that brother of his was locked up, and he had even killed a disciple of that sect. Asterisk, I should improve my strength first. Then, I'll go look for Dad, Mom, and Xiaomin. This cultivation world is really not peaceful. After absorbing a few mouthfuls of the spiritual liquid, Xiao Lingyu looked at the vast and empty mountain forest and could not help but sigh. There were no spirit stone veins in this mountain range. Therefore, the spiritual energy here was very thin. No cultivators were willing to stay here for a long time. There were not even any demon beasts or ferocious beasts with a little bit of intelligence. What Xiao Lingyu needed was the primal chaos energy. This kind of energy was very thin in most places in the cultivation world. Xiao Lingyu had a huge amount of spiritual liquid. Therefore, he did not care if the place he cultivated in was full of spiritual energy or not. At least, this place was very quiet. He wanted to settle himself down here first. However, this place was too close to the void inquiry stage. The nearby Taiyang City was one of the void inquiry stage's businesses. Therefore, Xiao Lingyu decisively gave up on this place. When the huge snake recovered, they set off again. To the huge snake, a bottle of spiritual liquid could only nourish its physical body. It did not have much effect on improving its strength unless it drank a lot of it. However, that bottle of 10,000-year-old king bee nectar was a good thing. Not only was it sweet, but the energy it contained was also very rich. The huge snake had already reached the late spirit severing realm. However, that bottle of 10,000-year-old king bee nectar was only effective for the first time. After drinking it again, it would not have any obvious effect. Otherwise, Xiao Lingyu would have given the other 2 bottles to the huge snake so that it could directly reach the body integration stage. After traveling for a few more days, Xiao Lingyu arrived at the edge of a desert. The desert in front of them was also quite famous on the Feiyu continent. It was called the Rockfall Desert because there were always rocks falling from the sky. Of course, those rocks were not meteorites that fell from the heavens, but from strong winds in the desert. The Rockfall Desert was very vast, spanning hundreds of thousands of miles. However, other than a few oases, there were no plants at all. That was because the sandstorm was too strong, and there were often large areas of rockfall rain. Ordinary plants simply couldn't survive. However, there were countless sand demons living under the Rockfall Desert. Due to the scarcity of spirit veins in the Rockfall Desert, the cultivation of those sand demons was not high. The sand demons in the Rockfall Desert had a very obvious characteristic, which was that they had thick skin and strong resistance to attacks. This was mainly because they had to be able to withstand the stones that could fall at any time when they came out. The leather or shell of the sand demons, as well as their inner cores, were all very tough. They were excellent materials for refining defensive magical equipment. Therefore, many cultivators entered the Rockfall Desert endlessly, risking the risk of being smashed by the rocks to hunt the sand demons. At the periphery of the Rockfall Desert, there were many small towns and cities. They were mainly there to provide convenience for those adventurers who wanted to hunt the sand demons. The reason why Shaolin Yu came here was firstly because the disciples of the Void Inquiry Stage, which was one of the top sects in the Feiyu continent, rarely came here. Secondly, the cultivators here came from all over the Feiyu continent. It was convenient for Shaolin Yu to inquire about some things. Thirdly, he was also preparing to hunt some sand demons. Of course, there was another more important thing that he could not tell others. The huge snake had already been hidden in the spiritual beast pouch. Shaolin Yu did not enter the Rockfall Desert directly. Instead, he wandered around the small towns in the periphery, constantly asking for information about Earth. However, what made him very disappointed was that he did not get any information even after more than a month. Whether it was intentionally asking around or inadvertently listening to other people's conversations, he did not get any information about Earth at all. It had already been 8 to 9 years since the end of the world on Earth. In a place like the cultivation world, there were too many accidents that could happen to mortals like Shaolin Yu's parents and Gu Xiaoman, who had no cultivation base if they did not have any good fortune. How could Shaolin Yu not be worried? However, there was nothing he could do. Shaolin Yu did not stay in those small towns for long. Since he did not get any useful information, he found a small mountain range far away from the towns and dug out an immortal's cave there. After blocking the entrance of the immortal's cave, he expanded the interior of the immortal's cave. Shaolin Yu meditated for 3 days and 3 nights. When his condition was at its peak, he took out some materials and began to concoct magic treasures and pills. The pills and magic treasures he concocted were all low grade. He also used a very ordinary pill furnace or weapon cauldron. The success rate was not high. However, it was just for practice. He was not a genius in concoction and had no intention of having any amazing achievements in this field. He just wanted to concoct some pills to protect his life, to assist in the cultivation of a 9-revolution chaos formula, or to concoct some magic treasures to fight against enemies. 3 months later, Shaolin Yu left the Immortal's Cave. The low-grade materials he collected before were all used up by him. However, he only got 2 low-grade spirit treasures and 2 types of low-grade spirit pills. If those experts in concoction were to concoct them with the materials Shaolin Yu had, the harvest would be at least 5 times more. Shaolin Yu was a person who was very easy to satisfy. He was already very satisfied that he could gain something from his first long concoction. As for the techniques he used to concoct magic treasures and pills, he learned them from reading books in his study room. It could be said that he stole them from the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect. When it came to alchemy and refining, Shaolin Yu had never thought of taking any shortcuts, nor did he think of relying on luck or some other external factors. He firmly believed that practice made perfect. Even if his talent wasn't very good, as long as he practiced more, he would naturally be able to grasp some tricks. After coming out to take a breather, Shaolin Yu once again wandered around the small town in the outer region of the Falling Rock Desert. However, when he returned to the Immortal's Cave, his face was still filled with disappointment. He still did not get any news. Shaolin Yu went into seclusion again. After meditating for a day in the quiet room of the Immortal's Cave, he opened his eyes. With a thought, 2 bottles of pills and a few bottles of spiritual liquid appeared before his eyes. He muttered to himself for a while before pouring half a bottle of spiritual liquid into his mouth. After that, he entered a meditative state to regulate his breathing. After the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, he opened another bottle and took out a low-grade spirit pill and put it into his mouth. His face showed that he was enjoying it. However, after a while, he opened another bottle and took out another type of low-grade spirit pill and swallowed it. The expression of enjoyment on his face slowly disappeared and was replaced by a frown. His face showed that he was in pain. His entire body was shining with a grayish, chaotic light. In his dantian, the chaotic golden core was trembling nonstop. It was also slowly expanding. Not long after, a large amount of grayish mist gathered on the surface of the chaotic golden core. The mist gradually formed a whirlpool that spun rapidly. Xiao Lingyu quickly poured more spiritual liquid into his mouth. Waves of spiritual power supported his meridians and poured into the whirlpool around the chaotic golden core. The swelling pain in his meridians caused Xiao Lingyu's expression to become almost distorted. If it weren't for the 2 low-grade spirit pills that he had taken to protect and nourish his meridians, he definitely wouldn't have been able to persist in his cultivation. The 2 types of spirit pills were the Meridian Protection Pill and the Meridian Cultivation Pill. They weren't spirit pills that could increase cultivation or heal injuries. However, the Meridian Protection Pill could form a membrane-like barrier on the walls of the meridians. It could not only reduce the impact of energy on the meridians when a cultivator's cultivation was circulating, but could also increase the speed of energy circulation in the meridians. On the other hand, the Meridian Cultivation Pill could seep into the meridians and flesh to nourish the cultivator's entire body. Therefore, Xiao Lingyu felt very comfortable when he took it. Xiao Lingyu's main purpose of taking the Meridian Cultivation Pill wasn't to nourish the body. When the Meridian Cultivation Pill seeped into his meridians, it could strengthen the tenacity of his meridians and expand the range of impact that his meridians could withstand. As for the Essence Strengthening Pill, although it had some effect on his meridians, it was limited to the Chaotic Foundation establishment stage. It wasn't easy to cultivate the 9 Revolutions Chaos formula. If one cultivated it step by step, there definitely wouldn't be enough time. Therefore, cultivators needed to be able to take shortcuts. Xiao Lingyu's master had imparted this mysterious technique to Xiao Lingyu and also imparted a lot of experience, including how to quickly increase cultivation. Xiao Lingyu's current method was taught to him by his master. However, the prerequisite for this method was that Xiao Lingyu had to have enough energy to support it. Under normal circumstances, this energy support was reflected in whether or not he had enough spirit stones. If he had enough spirit stones, he would need to refine the Meridian Cultivation Pill and the Meridian Protection Pill. Of course, it was fine to not refine them. It would be more convenient to buy them directly. However, there were many types of elixirs that needed to be used in the future, but it was impossible to buy all of them. Therefore, Xiao Lingyu felt that it was better to first start the foundation of refining elixirs. This seclusion took half a year. When Xiao Lingyu stopped all his movements, he happily discovered that the chaotic golden core in his dantian had grown from the size of a rice grain to the size of a peanut. This was the characteristic of the mid-stage chaotic golden core. When the chaotic golden core was the size of an egg, it was the late-stage chaotic golden core. In fact, Xiao Lingyu's cultivation strength was almost the same as a mid-stage nascent soul stage cultivator's. After stopping his cultivation, Xiao Lingyu went out again. Originally, he was prepared to inquire about the news of Earth. If he still did not gain anything, he would return to continue his seclusion and rush to the chaotic nascent soul stage in one go. However, he unexpectedly received a piece of news that made him give up this plan. There was another very important reason why Xiao Lingyu came to the Rockfall Desert. Jiang Lanyue had once said that there was a place where treasures were hidden in the Rockfall Desert. Xiao Lingyu came this time to take those treasures away. With Jiang Lanyue's status and strength, she naturally would not have the slightest greed for the treasures of the cultivation world. Therefore, although she had discovered the place, she did not touch it. However, she simply told Xiao Lingyu how to easily take those treasures away. What Xiao Lingyu did not expect was that the place where the treasures were hidden had been exposed. Now, many adventurers were rushing there. Naturally, he could not wait any longer. Otherwise, the treasures that should have belonged to him would fall into the hands of others. Huh. Chapter 28. The demonic beasts in the Rockfall Desert didn't have high cultivation, so the cultivators who targeted them naturally didn't have high cultivation. Shaolin Yu had stayed in the periphery of the Rockfall Desert for a long time. He often went to the small towns where the cultivators gathered. He had already discovered that most of the cultivators here were at the Gold Core stage, nascent soul stage, or out-of-body stage. Out-of-body stage cultivators were already considered masters in the periphery of the Rockfall Desert. It was rare to see cultivators above the out-of-body stage here. Even if there were occasional severed soul stage or unification stage cultivators, they didn't come to hunt those demonic beasts. Shaolin Yu had the protection of the big snake at the severed soul stage, so he shouldn't be in too much danger. Even if he was besieged, he should be able to escape unscathed. Therefore, Shaolin Yu didn't have to look for any companions. Instead, he aimed at the place where the treasure was hidden and let the big snake carry him at full speed. 2 days later, Shaolin Yu finally arrived at the place. In the process of rushing, he inevitably encountered the falling stones more than once. However, those stones falling from the sky couldn't get close to the big snake's body at all. While Shaolin Yu had the great snake to protect him, the other cultivators were not as lucky. Along the way, Shaolin Yu had seen the corpses of a good number of cultivators smashed by rocks. He had even personally witnessed a team of no less than 20 cultivators getting wiped out by a rain of rocks. At this time, in front of Shaolin Yu, there was a small oasis, and the treasure was hidden here. In the oasis, there was a small lake. Under the lake, there was a hidden mystery. This treasure place should have existed for countless years, but it was only discovered recently. The main reason was that the Feiyu continent was discovered too late by the cultivators of the cultivation world. Moreover, this desert was a place that the strong cultivators of the Feiyu continent didn't like. Even if ordinary cultivators passed by here, it was difficult for them to find anything unusual here. At most, they would stay for a while and then leave. Moreover, the oasis in the Rockfall Desert was not a safe place. On the contrary, the oasis was actually the most dangerous place in the Rockfall Desert because there would be sand demons with higher cultivation bases staying there for a long time. At first glance, there was nothing strange about this oasis. Under normal circumstances, even if cultivators saw this place, they would directly ignore it. A few days ago, a group of cultivators came here. They inadvertently went to the bottom of the lake and found a very solid stone door without spiritual power fluctuations. The stone door was divided into two and was tightly closed. The group of cultivators used all their strength, but they couldn't open it. They had also tried to reach the stone door from other directions without going through it, but they had failed. Even though they had explored the ground around the stone door, they had not found anything. Finally, they found that if they wanted to reach the stone door, they would have to open the stone door first. The strongest of them was only at leaving Aperture Realm primary stage, so they were unable to open the stone door. Thus, they had sent someone back to invite the experts over. Unfortunately, the person they sent back encountered the enemy and was captured. In order to save his own life, that person said that he found a place with hidden treasures. He also said that if they let him live, he would bring the enemy to the place where the treasures were hidden. After the first accident, several more accidents happened one after another. This matter spread like wildfire and quickly spread throughout the periphery of the Rockfall Desert. Almost all the cultivators in those small towns knew about this matter. Therefore, when Shaolin Yu came here, even though many cultivators died on the way, there were still countless cultivators gathered around this small oasis. Looking around, there were cultivators everywhere. They were either alone or in groups of 3 to 5. Their eyes were all fixed on the small lake at the center of the oasis. The small lake was not large and was circular in shape with a diameter of less than 1,000 feet. However, there was no empty space around the small lake. It was surrounded by several groups of cultivators. These groups of cultivators belonged to several different forces. They were very powerful and there were even severed soul stage experts among them. The other cultivators naturally didn't dare to break in. At that moment, those forces were probably discussing something. Xiaoling Yu came a little later and found out from the other cultivators that the stone door at the bottom of the lake had yet to be opened. However, it wouldn't be long before the stone door opened. Xiaoling Yu vaguely remembered that Jiang Lunyua once said that if they wanted to break open the stone door, they would have to use the full strength of a body integration stage expert or a top-grade offensive spiritual weapon. A top-grade offensive spiritual weapon was considered a very powerful magic weapon in the cultivation world. Generally speaking, top-grade spiritual weapons were in the hands of cultivators at the early stage of the body integration stage or higher. Even if other cultivators had them, it would be difficult for them to use their full strength. For a severed soul stage cultivator, having 2 or 3 top-grade spiritual weapons was already considered very rich. Although Xiao Lingyu had a way to open the stone door, he still needed to be able to bypass the inspection of those experts and reach the bottom of the lake. If he wanted to quietly go over and open the stone door, it was impossible to do so. He found a place and released the large snake, who had turned into a small snake, to eavesdrop on the conversation of the cultivators around the small lake. With the large snake's late-stage, severed soul stage cultivation, even if those cultivators were using voice transmissions, it would still be able to intercept some information. Not long after, Xiaoling Yu narrowed his eyes. The large snake had eavesdropped on a useful piece of information. It was that a body integration stage cultivator was coming. The news was correct. Another day passed, and a cultivator wrapped in a black robe stepped through the air and slowly arrived. I made everyone wait for a long time. This old man is a bit late. As the black robe slowly descended from the sky, he clasped his fist and spoke to the cultivators by the small lake. Everyone couldn't see the face of the black robe clearly, nor could they see through his cultivation. Even if a bold cultivator scanned with his spirit sense, he couldn't sense the other party's aura. The difference in cultivation level was too big. Senior Wu must be joking. It's our honor to be able to invite Senior here. We should have gone to invite Senior personally, but we need someone to take care of these things. Please don't blame us. It's also our fault for disturbing Senior's cultivation. The few spirit-severing stage cultivators who seemed to be the leaders hurriedly cupped their fists and bowed to greet him with great respect. The Feiyu continent has just been discovered by the cultivation world, so there are naturally many unknown places. This old man has been to a few places before, but I didn't find anything good. I hope this old man will be satisfied this time. The body integration stage, black-robed cultivator smiled as he slowly walked towards the small lake. When Xiaoling Yu learned that a severed soul stage master was coming, he had already put the snake into the spirit beast bag. Even though the snake was magical, it was difficult to hide under the scan of a severed soul stage master spirit sense. The small lake was still surrounded by the cultivators of those forces. Most of those cultivators were out-of-body stage masters, so some of the nascent soul stage and golden core stage cultivators who were watching from afar didn't dare to take a step forward. Boom! Not long after the severed soul stage master and the severed soul stage master fell to the bottom of the lake, suddenly, there was a loud explosion. Xiaoling Yu only felt the world tremble. The small lake had disappeared and was replaced by a large pit. The power of a severed soul stage master was really strong. The frightened cultivators all flew up one after another, while the cultivators who were watching from afar came closer. Everyone knew that the door to the treasure place was about to open. Xiaoling Yu glanced around and found that there were no less than 1,000 people around. This made him frown even more. He wasn't in a hurry because he knew that not everyone who passed through the stone door would be able to obtain the treasure. However, if more cultivators went in, it would naturally be more difficult for him to obtain the treasure. In the following 2 hours, there were continuous explosions from the bottom of the pit, and the area of the pit was constantly expanding. Boom, boom, boom. After a series of rapid explosions that sounded like a series of cannons, the crater finally quieted down. A burst of silver light soared into the sky and went straight into the depths of the clouds. When the silver light disappeared. Everyone slowly approached the big pit, only to find that there were no cultivators in the pit. The stone door had been blasted open, so the powerhouses must have gone in. However, there were no less than 100 cultivators around the big pit. They had their backs to the big pit, preventing other cultivators from entering. Xiao Yu wasn't in the mood to wait. He directly released the serpent and rushed into the big pit. The defensive circle formed by the out-of-body stage cultivators was useless against the serpent. The serpent spat out a few ice arrows, which tore through the defensive circle. Xiao Yu easily entered the bottom of the big pit and passed through the stone door. The serpent's attack greatly impacted the defensive circle formed by the out-of-body stage cultivators. The other cultivators who were already itching to make a move also took this opportunity to charge forward. No matter how the out-of-body stage cultivators tried to defend themselves, they were unable to completely repel the combined assault of over 1,000 cultivators. More and more cultivators reached the bottom of the crater and passed through the stone door. After passing through the stone door, there was a hall. In the center of the hall, there was a miniature teleportation array formed by 6 stone pillars. Xiao Yu had never seen a teleportation array before, but he had heard about it from Jiang Lanyue and read about it in books. Therefore, he didn't hesitate for a moment. He directly entered the teleportation array and pressed his palm on the compass of the teleportation array. He channeled a little of his power into the compass, and the teleportation array rumbled. A moment later, a dazzling white light flashed, and Xiao Yu's body disappeared from the teleportation array. At this time, other cultivators rushed in. The teleportation process was dizzying. Xiao Yu could only see countless streaks of light flying in front of his eyes. He couldn't stabilize his body at all. However, the teleportation ended after 3 seconds. Xiao Yu fell into a dark underground tunnel. This tunnel was very dark, and the surroundings were abnormally cold. Even though he circulated his power throughout his body, he was still shivering from the cold. Oh no, I'm actually teleported to this tunnel. How unlucky. Xiao Yu adapted a little and recovered from the dizziness caused by the teleportation. When he saw the surroundings clearly, his heart thumped. Jiang Lanyue told him that the teleportation array was random. After everyone entered, they would be teleported to random places. Chapter 29. There were more than a dozen tunnels here, and each tunnel had a different situation. Some of them were relatively safe. As long as one was at the nascent soul stage, one could reach the end. However, there were also some tunnels that even a severed soul stage expert might not be able to pass through. The tunnel Xiao Yu was in was extremely cold, and it was one of the most dangerous. Therefore, he was a little depressed and secretly cursed his bad luck. However, he was also glad that the tunnel he was in was not the most dangerous one. This was only the first test to obtain the treasure. There were more difficult encounters to come. However, with Jiang Lanyue's guidance, as long as Xiao Yu could safely pass through this tunnel, he would be able to find a way to deal with the dangers that came after. Xiao Yu knew that the further he went, the lower the temperature would be. If he had to deal with it with his own strength, it would be better for him to stay here. No matter if he went forward or backward, he would reach the second test and face the lower the temperature would be. However, he had the help of the snake, so he had enough confidence to move forward. After adapting to the environment and sorting out his thoughts, Xiao Yu took firm steps forward. In order to obtain the treasure, he had to hurry. One had to know that there were body integration stage experts in this place. According to Jiang Lanyue, body integration stage cultivators who entered this place should be able to find the treasure as long as they were not particularly unlucky. Xiao Yu moved forward as fast as he could. After 10 minutes, he had reached a place where he could no longer resist the cold. He released the snake. The snake did not feel uncomfortable at all. It used its tongue to surround Xiao Yu, and then continued forward. Xiao Yu was not unlucky when he was teleported here. Even for the snake, it was a little difficult for it to pass through this cold tunnel. Half an hour later, the snake's movements slowed down. The stone walls of the tunnel were covered with a thick layer of ice crystals, and in front of the tunnel, gusts of cold wind mixed with snowflakes kept blowing. The low temperature even covered the serpent's body with frost, and the extremely cold temperature made the serpent feel that its power, blood, and bones were about to be frozen. Such a low temperature was enough to hurt a snake at the late stage of the spirit-severing stage. If an ordinary cultivator came here, if he didn't have a high-grade spiritual weapon to protect his body, he would have been frozen into an ice sculpture. Xiao Yu continuously took out bottles of spirit liquid for the snake. This kind of gentle spirit liquid that did not need to be refined was very effective in nourishing and protecting the body. With the support of the spirit liquid, the snake was able to continue moving forward. After another hour, they finally arrived at the most dangerous part of the tunnel. The snake's scales were completely frozen, and its flesh began to show extensive frostbite. The serpent was still moving forward, but its consumption of spirit liquid had increased by a lot because it needed a large amount of spirit liquid to recover its frostbitten flesh. In the end, Xiao Yu even took out a bottle of 10,000-year-old queen bee nectar and gave it to the snake. After using up the bottle of 10,000-year-old queen bee nectar, the serpent was finally able to pass through the tunnel with Xiao Yu. The temperature immediately returned to normal, and the frost on the serpent's body also melted rapidly. The exhausted serpent was directly put into the spirit beast bag by Xiao Yu to rest and left more than a dozen bottles of spirit liquid in the spirit beast bag as a reward for the serpent. At this time, Xiao Yu was in a long corridor. There were more than a dozen stone doors on the walls on both sides of the corridor. These stone doors were connected to the tunnels. Xiao Yu had just entered this corridor from one of the stone doors. However, these stone doors could not be opened from the side of the corridor. They could only be opened from the tunnel. Xiao Yu walked along the corridor, but his expression was not happy at all. This was because along the way, he found that 8 stone doors had already been opened. This also proved that 8 people had already arrived at this corridor before him. At the end of the corridor was a low doorway, and at the side of the doorway was a stone qilin sculpture. This qilin had a single horn with spiral-shaped grooves on it. Xiao Yu walked to the side of the doorway and broke off the horn of the stone qilin sculpture. The horn seemed to be just a part of the stone sculpture. It didn't give off any energy fluctuations, nor did it have anything special about it. Any cultivator who passed by here wouldn't even think of breaking it off. However, Xiao Yu did so because he knew that the horn would be of great use later on. Unfortunately, the scene of Xiao Yu breaking off the qilin's horn was seen by a cultivator who had just arrived at the corridor. Xiao Yu originally wanted to kill him to silence him, but first of all, the other party had no enmity with him, and second of all, the other party was a powerhouse at the severed soul stage. He gave up on this idea and directly went into the doorway. The severed soul stage cultivator walked to the front of the doorway and carefully sized it up. He did not see anything wrong with this qilin sculpture, but he felt that it was too strange when Xiao Yu broke off the qilin's horn. So he directly put the entire stone sculpture into his storage bracelet. Behind the doorway was a completely dark world. Here, no light source could project too far. The darkness here seemed to have the ability to devour light. Even if the cultivators released spells or used their own spirit force to illuminate, they could only illuminate a radius of 3 meters around them. The most important thing was that the cultivator's spirit sense and light would be devoured by the darkness and could not cover too far. Under normal circumstances, after cultivators came here and familiarized themselves with the situation here, they would rush forward in one direction. This was the only way. However, Xiao Yu did not do this. After flying randomly for a while, he took out a feather. This feather was very light, but it could emit light and had some slight spirit force fluctuations. This was because this was the feather of a flying demonic beast. This kind of feather was almost everywhere on the flying feather continent, but cultivators would not pay attention to it. The feather floated in front of Xiao Yu. It shone with a faint light, but it could only illuminate a palm-sized area. However, This ordinary flying demonic beast feather floated in a direction in the darkness without any wind. Xiao Yu's heart suddenly relaxed. He slowly followed the feather. This was the secret to passing this trial. If they did not find the right method, they would be trapped here for a long time. The area here was very vast. Even if a body integration cultivator came here, it would take dozens of hours to find their way out. Moreover, there were some mechanisms here. If they were careless, it would bring great danger to the cultivators. Although Xiao Yu's method of using the feather to lead the way was a trick, it had a drawback. It was not fast enough. Therefore, after 40 hours, Xiao Yu finally passed this trial. The feather led him to a tall stone door. Then, it was sucked into the door by an indescribable force. Although there was a gap in the door, cultivators could not pass through it like the feather. Next to the stone door was a stone statue. However, it was not a qilin, but a one-eyed beast. Xiao Yu pried out the one-eyed beast's eyeball and put it into his storage belt. The stone door was tightly shut. However, it was very heavy. Although Xiao Yu's strength was not enough to push it open, the late-stage spirit-severing stage snake that had been recuperating for a long time could easily push it open. The stone door opened, and Xiao Yu arrived at the edge of a sea of fire. As far as his eyes could see, he could see a lone island in the middle of the sea of fire. On the lone island was a mountain. There were no living creatures on the lone island or the mountain. There were only bright red rocks that emitted a fiery light. But even standing on the edge of the sea of fire, Xiao Yu could still feel the extremely high temperature in the sea of fire. However, the flames and high temperature in the sea of fire were suppressed by a powerful force and could not overflow strongly. Xiao Yu also knew that the powerful force not only limited the sea of fire, but also limited the cultivators who flew over the sea of fire. It was said that it was impossible to fly directly over the sea of fire without reaching the Deshang stage. If you forced to fly, you would only be pressed into the sea of fire and burned to death by the raging fire. Of course, there was also a path from the shore of the sea of fire to the lone island. There was no need to forcibly fly over it. There was more than one path. There was an iron chain, a wooden bridge more than 3 feet wide, several identical boats floating on the sea of fire, and a miniature transmission array. Xiao Yu knew that the miniature transmission array was actually leading to the outside. If he entered it and activated it, he would directly return to the bottom of the big pit in the falling rock desert. In fact, none of the 3 options to go to the lone island was absolutely safe. Jiang Lanyue did not remind Xiao Yu how to choose the best option, so Xiao Yu was more hesitant. But there were still many cultivators around. They would be trapped in the dark space for a while, but it was impossible for them to be trapped there forever, especially the combination stage cultivator. So Xiao Yu did not have much time to dawdle. After pondering for a moment, he felt that on the surface, the iron chain was the most dangerous, the wooden bridge was the safest, and the boat was in the middle of the danger factor. But in fact, it was hard to say whether this was the case. However, Xiao Yu felt that if the danger factor of these 3 options was high, medium, and low, then the boat would definitely be in the middle. He did not dare to bet that he would be able to choose the least difficult option, so he chose to take the boat. Xiao Yu jumped into a small boat and saw a palm print inside. He pressed his palm on it, and then found that his cultivation began to involuntarily pour into it. He hurriedly withdrew his palm. Unsurprisingly, he was able to withdraw his palm, but the boat that was already trembling slightly quieted down again. Xiao Yu knew that this boat could only move forward with his cultivation, so he pressed his palm on it again and poured his cultivation into the boat again. At first, the speed of his cultivation was not very fast, but as the boat moved further and further away from the shore, his cultivation consumption also increased. When the boat had already traveled 1/10 of the distance, Xiao Yu's cultivation was almost depleted. He could only rely on spiritual liquid to continue to maintain it. At this moment, he could not help but think, what would happen if the snake provided the energy? This palm print was obviously designed to deal with human cultivators. If the snake did not have a palm and poured its energy into it, would the boat be able to accept it? When the boat had traveled about 1/3 of the distance, the sea of fire suddenly surged, and the boat became a little unstable. If Xiaoling Yu had not been so focused, the boat would have been flipped over. Moving forward in the huge waves was not very dangerous, but he needed to be able to stabilize the boat. And to stabilize the boat, he needed to have enough energy to support it. Every time the boat was hit by the waves of fire, the energy consumption would increase by several times. Chapter 30. Just as Xiaoling Yu was slowly approaching the island in the small boat, more and more cultivators were rushing over from where he had set off. Everyone looked at the chains, the small bridge, the small boat, and the teleportation formation with complicated expressions on their faces. Which choice was the simplest one? No one could be sure. Someone had entered the teleportation formation and disappeared. Apart from Xiaoling Yu, no one knew that the cultivators who had entered the teleportation formation had lost their chance to obtain the treasure. Many of the more rational cultivators did not choose the teleportation formation. Some of them did not even make a choice. They wanted to observe Xiaoling Yu's situation. If Xiaoling Yu successfully reached the other side of the island on the small boat, they would definitely choose the small boat without hesitation. However, some people did not want to wait. Everyone knew that if they reached the other side earlier, they would be able to see the treasure earlier. Some of the cultivators who did not want to observe chose the small boat, some chose the chains, and naturally, some chose the small bridge. The body integration cultivator wrapped in a black robe was naturally unwilling to wait. However, like Xiaoling Yu, he did not choose the chains or the small bridge. Instead, he chose the small boat. The cultivators who chose the chains safely walked 1/3 of the way. However, the chains began to shake uncontrollably. Waves of fire constantly surged from the sea of fire and attacked the cultivators who were walking on the chains. An out-of-body integration cultivator was unlucky. He was only halfway through the journey when he was engulfed by the waves of fire and burned into nothingness. The cultivators who were walking on the wooden plank bridge did not have it easy either. Not only were they attacked by the waves of fire, but the wooden planks on the wooden plank bridge were also fake. If they accidentally stepped on the fake wooden planks, they would directly fall into the sea of fire. It could be said that the small boat, the chains, and the wooden plank bridge were all very difficult to cross. The small boat seemed to be indestructible by the waves of fire and could protect the cultivators. However, if the cultivators were not strong enough and could not stabilize the small boat, they would fall into the sea of fire. The body integration cultivator's cultivation was relatively strong. Although he had set off a little late, he quickly caught up with Xiaoling Yu. The body integration cultivator, who was walking side by side with Xiaoling Yu, glanced at Xiaoling Yu. He was very curious about this young cultivator who had arrived first. However, he could not use his spiritual sense here, so he could not see through Xiaoling Yu's strength. However, from the way Xiaoling Yu was struggling to steer the small boat and constantly drinking spirit liquid, he could tell that Xiaoling Yu's strength was not very strong. The body integration cultivator seemed to be more relaxed. However, he was only halfway through the journey. The real test was at the end of the journey. However, the body integration cultivator laughed strangely at Xiaoling Yu. Then, he waved his hand and shot out a beam of spiritual light. He wanted to attack Xiaoling Yu. The beam of spiritual light was extremely fast, but it was under great pressure. In the end, it could not reach Xiaoling Yu. Instead, it exploded not far from Xiaoling Yu's small boat, setting off a fierce wave of fire that swept toward Xiaoling Yu. "Damn you!" Xiaoling Yu cursed loudly. She poured all her strength into the small boat. Even so, the small boat was swept away by the wave of fire. Fortunately, Xiaoling Yu used all her strength, and the boat did not capsize. "Huh." The body integration cultivator laughed and said, "You want to snatch the treasure with such little strength? You really don't know what's good for you." Perhaps the body integration cultivator felt that Xiaoling Yu's strength was too weak and did not pose a threat to him at all. After laughing, he distanced himself from Xiaoling Yu. "You better not give me a chance." Otherwise, I'll stab you in the butt. Xiao Yu stabilized the small boat. Seeing that the other party had left, his heart calmed down. However, he could not help but curse in his heart. The consumption of his strength was increasing. If it wasn't for the fact that he could use the spiritual liquid without refining it, he would not have been able to persist. After barely holding on for a while, he let go of his hand. He wanted to let the snake, who had transformed into a small snake, try. However, he found that the palm print, which was obviously a human's palm print, could not accept the snake's strength at all. Xiao Yu could only continue. However, when he saw the cultivators on the wooden bridge fall into the sea of fire one by one, he felt a lot better. He was secretly glad that he did not choose the small bridge. The first person to reach the small island was not Xiao Yu, nor was it the body integration cultivator. Instead, it was a severed soul stage cultivator who walked on the iron chain. From this, it could be seen that walking on the iron chain was actually the easiest, while walking on the bridge was the most dangerous. Just as Xiao Yu expected, although the difficulty of taking the boat was high, it was the safest. The second person to reach the small island was the body integration cultivator. The third person was not Xiao Yu, but a severed soul stage cultivator who walked on the iron chain. By the time all the cultivators reached the small island, they had either been burned to death or had already reached the small island. Xiao Yu was still a third of the way to the small island. What made him a little depressed was that the first 3 cultivators to reach the small island all received rewards from the sky. The first was a high-grade spiritual armor, the second was a high-grade spiritual sword, and the third was a high-grade refining material. There is already a high-grade spiritual weapon as a reward here. There must be a top-grade spiritual weapon or even an immortal weapon later. The severed soul stage cultivator who reached the small island first was probably afraid that the body integration cultivator would snatch his spiritual armor, so he said this: "Your spiritual armor is not bad. If this old man didn't already have a high-grade spiritual armor, I would have traded this high-grade spiritual sword and some spirit stones with you," the body integration cultivator said indifferently. After consuming more than half of the spirit liquid he had collected, Xiao Yu finally reached the small island. At this time, the cultivators who had arrived before him had already disappeared. Xiao Yu came too late and was not ranked at all, so he did not receive any rewards. Behind him, there were many cultivators who had just arrived on the small boat, the iron chain, and the wooden bridge. In the end, it would be good if 1/5 of the cultivators reached the small island safely. Moreover, they came too late and did not receive any rewards at all. The other cultivators had already set off, but Xiao Yu was not in a hurry. He knew that the fastest person would not necessarily get the best treasures. The small island was not big and was almost completely occupied by the mountain in front of him. The real treasure was at the top of the mountain, but there was a huge pressure here. It was not easy to reach the top of the mountain. Even the body integration cultivator would have to spend a lot of effort. If Xiao Yu went up the mountain under normal circumstances, even with the help of the mountain, he would have to suffer a lot before he could slowly climb up the mountain. However, he would not do that. He walked to the back of the mountain and found a stone Qilin. This stone Qilin statue was among the stones as if it had been abandoned here aimlessly. There was an obvious groove on its forehead, which looked a little strange. Xiao Yu took out the Qilin's horn and filled it into the groove on the stone Qilin statue's forehead. The Qilin statue slowly moved, revealing a low door. Xiao Yu happily went through the doorway and saw a stone staircase that went straight up. He walked up the staircase. Not long after Xiao Yu entered the door, a severed soul stage cultivator appeared in front of the door. This cultivator was the one who saw Xiao Yu break off the Qilin's horn. He was also the third cultivator to reach the island. There's indeed a problem. Fortunately, I waited for him for a while. The severed soul stage cultivator said proudly, and then went into the door. The biggest reason why he waited for Xiao Yu was not that he suspected that there was a problem with Xiao Yu breaking off the Qilin's horn, but that he did not want to climb the mountain with the body integration cultivator. Even if he climbed up with the body integration cultivator around, what benefits could he get? Xiaoling Yu had just taken a few steps when he found that someone was following behind him. He looked back in surprise. The severed soul stage cultivator walked up and said politely, "This little brother is really strange. You actually know about this secret passage." Xiaoling Yu said politely, "I can't guarantee whether this passage is safe or not, but if Senior is willing to go with me, Junior will be happy to have an expert like you to take care of me." The severed soul stage cultivator nodded and said, "As long as little brother doesn't take me to death, I will naturally take care of you." Xiaoling Yu knew that if this guy didn't need him to lead the way, he might have directly killed him. He didn't want to make too many mistakes. After all, the other party didn't show any malice, so he didn't let the big snake move. Instead, he walked in front fearlessly and continued to climb. With a big snake, why would Xiaoling Yu be afraid of a severed soul stage cultivator? Although this was a shortcut and there was no danger, it was definitely not easy to reach the destination. The higher they went, the greater the pressure in the space. However, the increase in pressure was much smaller than outside. Xiaoling Yu was only in existence comparable to a nascent soul cultivator. As he walked, he couldn't take it anymore. Not only did his speed slow down, beads of sweat seeped out of his forehead, and he was panting heavily. The severed soul stage cultivator looked relaxed. He walked in front of Xiaoling Yu, grabbed Xiaoling Yu's shoulder, and carried Xiaoling Yu forward. However, as they continued to climb, the severed soul stage cultivator released a defensive barrier to protect Xiaoling Yu, so that Xiaoling Yu would not be affected by the pressure. Xiaoling Yu had a good impression of this severed soul stage cultivator at this time. After all, he was helped by him. Half an hour later, the stone steps came to an end, but there was a stone door blocking the way. At the door of the stone door, there was a stone sculpture of a one-eyed beast. "Little brother, you should have a way to open this stone door, right?" The severed soul stage cultivator used all his strength but still couldn't open the stone door, so he asked Xiaoling Yu. Xiaoling Yu nodded, then took out a stone one-eyed beast and stuffed it into the groove on the head of the one-eyed beast. After the stone sculpture of the one-eyed beast shook for a while, the stone door slowly opened, and a stone staircase still extending upward came into view. As they continued to climb the stairs, the pressure in the space continued to increase, but the severed soul stage cultivator was still able to hold on. But half an hour later, the pressure in the space was so great that even the severed soul stage cultivator felt very strained. However, a stone door that was completely open could already be seen. After a few more steps, they would reach the end of the stone staircase. Seeing this situation, the severed soul stage cultivator smiled at Xiaoling Yu, then withdrew the defensive barrier on Xiaoling Yu and walked forward alone. The defensive barrier suddenly disappeared, and the huge pressure immediately caused Xiaoling Yu to fall on the stone staircase. His bones made a crisp sound. Chapter 31. The severed soul stage cultivator didn't have to share the pressure with Xiaoling Yu. He could continue forward alone. After all, this was a secret passage with a shortcut. It was much easier than climbing the mountain from the outside. Xiaoling Yu didn't blame the other party too much. After all, if it was him, he might have thought of doing the same. As the saying goes, every man for himself, and the devil takes the hindmost. Although the severed soul stage cultivator tried his best and was able to bring Xiaoling Yu to the end of the stone steps, who knew if there were any unknown dangers ahead? For cultivator who came to adventure, it was very necessary to maintain their strength to the maximum extent. But what Xiaoling Yu didn't expect was that after the severed soul stage cultivator reached the end of the stone steps, he turned around and smiled at Xiaoling Yu. Then he took out a spirit talisman and threw it at Xiaoling Yu. As soon as the spirit talisman left the palm of the severed soul stage cultivator, it turned into a golden brick and smashed down at Xiaoling Yu's head. However, due to the restrictions of the spatial pressure, the brick didn't hit Xiaoling Yu. Instead, it exploded in front of Xiaoling Yu. However, the powerful impact caused Xiaoling Yu to roll down the stone steps. Seeing that Xiaoling Yu had rolled down, the severed soul stage cultivator turned around with a smile. After a moment of dizziness, Xiao Lingyu stabilized his body. His expression was extremely angry. He didn't mind that the severed soul stage cultivator abandoned him. He could also understand that the cultivator went up alone. However, he couldn't forgive the other party for attacking him after reaching the destination. He couldn't withstand the spatial pressure here, but that guy still attacked him. He was clearly adding insult to injury. If Xiao Yu had the chance, he would definitely kill such a sinister person. At the same time, Xiao Yu was a little regretful. He regretted that he didn't let the serpent come out earlier to kill that person. He regretted that he didn't let the serpent come out immediately when that person put him down. Xiao Yu felt that the serpent was his biggest trump card. Everyone said not to reveal their biggest trump card easily, so he had been hiding the serpent in front of everyone. However, there was no need to hide it anymore. With a thought from Xiao Yu, the snake flew out of the spirit beast bag and coiled around Xiao Yu's arm like a small snake. At the same time, it released a spirit light that enveloped Xiao Yu's body. With this spiritual light, Xiao Yu could no longer feel the pressure of the space. He drank a few mouthfuls of the spiritual liquid, and after recovering slightly, he quickly rushed towards the open stone door. Behind a stone door was a large hall. The hall seemed a little empty and ancient. There were several silver pillars in the hall that needed two people to wrap their arms around, and the pillars were engraved with some mysterious runes and lifelike mythological beasts. Xiao Yu knew that this hall was the place where the treasures were hidden, and he also knew where the real treasures were hidden. At present, no one else had come. Only the severed soul stage cultivator was standing at a table in the hall. There were 3 light shields on the table, and there were several treasures inside the light shields. It was clear that the severed soul stage cultivator was trying to break the light shield to obtain the treasures. With a bang, the light shield didn't break, but the severed soul stage cultivator was repelled far away. After the severed soul stage cultivator stabilized himself, he looked at Xiao Yu and asked in surprise, How did you come up? If you can come up, why can't I come up? Xiao Yu didn't take the treasures. Instead, he slowly walked towards the severed soul stage cultivator. His expression was a bit gloomy, and his killing intent was undisguised. The severed soul stage cultivator narrowed his eyes and asked, You want to kill me? That's right. Xiao Yu responded indifferently. Just as he was about to order the serpent to attack, a violent and ruthless aura rushed in, pushing him and the severed soul stage cultivator back. What the hell is this place? If there is no good treasure, this old man will tear this place down. The cold wind stopped, and a cultivator wrapped in a tattered black robe rushed into the hall. Xiao Yu glanced at him, and his heart immediately skipped a beat. The person who came was the body integration stage cultivator. However, he looked a bit embarrassed. His black robe was tattered, there was blood at the corner of his mouth, and his black and white hair was very messy. If the body integration stage cultivator was in such a state, it could be imagined that if there was no secret passage, Xiao Yu would have to spend a lot of effort to reach this hall. He would probably have to feed the serpent the last bottle of the 10,000-year queen bee nectar. 2 juniors came before this old man. The body integration stage cultivator looked around and saw Xiao Yu and the severed soul stage cultivator. His expression was surprised and suspicious. Haha, fortunately, the treasure is still here. Just when Xiao Yu and the severed soul stage cultivator were about to face a great enemy, the black-robed man walked to the front of the offering table. Bang! The body integration stage cultivator didn't hesitate at all. He immediately slapped the light shield on the offering table. Unfortunately, like the severed soul stage cultivator, he was bounced back by the light shield, but the light shield didn't shatter. This old man doesn't believe that a broken light shield that has been eroded for many years can stop this old man from taking the treasure. The body integration stage cultivator was a little angry. He opened his mouth and spat out a ray of light, and a black spirit sword appeared. As soon as the black-colored spirit sword appeared, the wailing of malicious spirits shook the hall. Its entire body was suffused with a shocking black mist, yet it rippled with a sinister killing intent that caused one's entire body to tremble. Obviously, this black-robed man was a demonic cultivator, and the black sword was definitely a great killing weapon. The attention of the severed soul stage cultivator and the black-robed man was focused on the 3 light shields on the offering table. Shaoling Yu, however, glanced at the entrance of the hall. On the floor of the entrance of the hall, there was a stone sculpture of 2 dragons playing with a pearl. The pearl that was embedded in the ground didn't have the slightest energy fluctuation and didn't look strange at all. It seemed to be carved from stone. It was the best treasure hidden in this place. The severed soul stage cultivator and Shaoling Yu had taken a shortcut and entered the hall without passing through the entrance. As for the body integration stage cultivator, he definitely wouldn't stay outside for even a moment. Furthermore, the 3 treasures on the offering table had completely attracted their attention. Shaoling Yu waited for the black-robed man to attack the light shield with the demonic sword before quietly running outside. He bit his finger and dripped a drop of blood essence on the stone pearl. When the essence blood fell on the stone bead, the stone layer on the surface of the stone bead immediately exploded. A fist-sized bead that was shining with an emerald green light slowly rose up. If one looked closely, they would discover that Shaoling Yu's essence blood was spreading into wisps of blood within the bead. After spreading throughout the entire bead, they slowly disappeared. Shaoling Yu reached out to grab the pearl. Although he could grab it and wasn't injured, he couldn't move it at all. He couldn't put it in his body or his storage belt. At the same time, there was another explosion in the hall, followed by the laughter of the body integration stage cultivator. Haha, it's a top-grade spirit artifact. Congratulations to Senior Wu for obtaining the treasure. It's just a top-grade spirit artifact. It's nothing to celebrate. I hope there are immortal or demonic artifacts in the other 2 light shields. Shaoling Yu was very nervous. He stared at the emerald green pearl in front of him and tried to form a mental connection with it. Dripping blood was to make the pearl recognize him as its master. Now that the master recognition was completed, the pearl seemed to be a little slow after being sealed for so long. It would take a while for it to obey the orders of its new master. Shaoling Yu was afraid that his actions outside would be noticed by the 2 people inside, especially the body integration stage cultivator. Even if Shaoling Yu and the serpent worked together, they wouldn't be able to defeat him. Although the 2 masters in the room were still thinking about the other 2 light shields and didn't notice Shaoling Yu's movements, a severed soul stage cultivator rushed up from the foot of the mountain at this time. The scene of the emerald green pearl appearing in front of Shaoling Yu was seen by the severed soul stage cultivator who had just come up. The severed soul stage cultivator was also quite knowledgeable. He saw the magic of the pearl at a glance and noticed that Shaoling Yu's cultivation wasn't high. He directly rushed over, and a stream of light transformed from a spirit talisman shot towards Shaoling Yu first. Bad luck! Shaoling Yu cursed and swung his arm. The serpent rushed out and spat out an ice arrow to block the spirit talisman. The serpent directly returned to its original size. The aura of a severed soul stage cultivator surged out. Its serpent tongue was like a sharp sword that could extend infinitely. It rushed out very quickly and pierced the severed soul stage cultivator's lower abdomen. The serpent's tongue immediately rolled back and swallowed the nascent soul of the severed soul stage cultivator into the serpent's stomach. The severed soul stage cultivator didn't even have time to shout before he died. He had consumed too much energy on the way up. However, the battle outside and the aura released by the serpent had already attracted the attention of the 2 experts in the hall. At this time, the black-robed man broke the second restriction light shield and obtained another top-grade spirit weapon. In addition to being happy, the black-robed man and the severed soul stage cultivator looked at the entrance of the hall together. Under Shaoling Yu's urgent mental summons, the emerald green bead had already begun to tremble slightly. It wouldn't be long before Shaoling Yu could absorb it into his body. However, the 2 experts in the hall had already discovered that it wouldn't be easy for him to take the bead away so easily. Good treasure, it's mine. After the black-robed man took a look, He immediately shouted with his eyes wide open. His body flashed, and like a black wind, he rolled to the door and held the pearl in his hand. Attack! In a hurry, Shaolin Yu gave an order to the serpent that had just swallowed the nascent soul of the severed soul stage cultivator. Although the serpent was a little afraid of the severed soul stage cultivator, it still pounced without hesitation. Beast, go away. The severed soul stage cultivator frowned slightly. He raised his other arm and slapped at the serpent. The mighty and powerful palm force directly blasted the serpent far away. Although the serpent was only one step away from the severed soul stage, this step represented the gap between two big realms. Even though it had the blood of the Azure Dragon, it was not a real dragon after all. It was difficult for it to challenge someone of a higher realm. Chapter 32. After Blackrobe, who was in the body fusion stage, repelled the serpent, he channeled all of his energy in an attempt to take the emerald green bead away. Unfortunately, the bead did not budge at all. Has it already recognized you as its master? Blackrobe frowned and looked at Shaolin Yu with a sharp gaze. Shaolin Yu's heart beat wildly under the gaze of a body fusion stage master. Even though it was just a gaze, he felt immense pressure. Shaolin Yu could imagine that if he were to be attacked by a body fusion stage master, even if he had 10 lives, he would not be able to survive. Although the serpent was slightly injured, it still flew back and coiled itself behind Shaolin Yu. The serpent's tongue flicked and flicked, as if it was facing a great enemy. No wonder you were able to make it here. It turns out that you have something to rely on. I advise you to voluntarily remove your relationship with this bead. Otherwise, I will have no choice but to obliterate you. Blackrobe tried to use his powerful spiritual sense to invade the bead and erase the mental connection between Shaolin Yu and the bead. However, his spiritual sense could not penetrate the bead at all. Why should I? Shaolin Yu replied stubbornly, but his body involuntarily took 2 steps back. Because you can't beat me, Blackrobe said as he released his grip on the bead and slowly walked toward Shaolin Yu. Shaolin Yu was a little nervous. If not for the serpent, he would have been scared to death by such a strong opponent. Feeling guilty, he summoned the Golden Shield Talisman Treasure. Not to mention that this talisman treasure has already lost most of its power. Even if it was at its peak, it would have no effect on me. As Blackrobe spoke, he suddenly stretched out his palm and slapped the Golden Shield Talisman Treasure into a sky full of golden light. Shaolin Yu did not retreat. Instead, he moved in a circle. His eyes flickered between the bead and the hall. Since you are unwilling to give it up, I can only send you to your death. As Blackrobe spoke, his body flashed, and as if he had teleported, he appeared beside Shaolin Yu. His palm turned into a sharp claw and slapped towards Shaolin Yu's head. Shaolin Yu could not dodge at all. Instead, he pierced the silver needle towards Blackrobe's palm. At this moment, Blackrobe's heart actually felt a sense of danger. He always trusted his intuition and immediately retracted his hand. The black demonic sword appeared in his hand and sliced horizontally towards Shaolin Yu's neck. If there was nothing to block it, Shaolin Yu's body would be separated from his body. On the other hand, Blackrobe's demonic sword was a supreme-grade spiritual artifact. Its offensive power could only be blocked by a supreme-grade spiritual artifact or an even higher defensive artifact. At this juncture, Blackrobe's to block the attack. Clank. Clack Blackrobe's to twos to assess. He's twos to the to protect, to fall twos to fall twos to roto the robe. As to the of black stage, that there was still a light barrier on the table that had not been opened. There was also a treasure inside. Shaolin Yu was only hit by the force of the attack and did not suffer any serious injuries. He leaped up and used the silver needle to pierce the light barrier beside him. As expected, under the attack of the silver needles, the light barrier was directly shattered. Shaolin Yu didn't even look at it, as he stowed away the last remaining treasure. At this moment, the body integration stage powerhouse was slowly approaching with a demonic sword enshrouded in black mist. The emerald green bead had already formed a mental connection with Xiaoling Yu and was slowly flying into the hall. However, it was shrouded by the combination stage expert's aura and could not get close to Xiaoling Yu. The snake was also outside the hall. Xiaoling Yu did not allow it to continue attacking, so it did not dare to rush in recklessly. You're really interesting. You're about to die, but you still have the mind to get your hands on other treasures. The black-robed man did not stop Xiaoling Yu from taking the treasure, but he sneered. This kid is really interesting. Not only does he know the secret passage that leads directly to this place, but he also knows the location of the most powerful treasure here. The severed soul stage cultivator followed behind the black-robed man and said with a sinister smile. He could not wait for the black-robed man to kill Xiaoling Yu, because Xiaoling Yu had a deep killing intent towards him just now. Moreover, Xiaoling Yu also had the ability to kill him. Xiaoling Yu knew that there was no way to end this peacefully, so he did not say anything more. He immediately ordered the snake to use all its strength to delay the two of them for a while. The combination stage black-robed man's attention was focused on the silver needle in Xiaoling Yu's hand. The appearance of the silver needle made him feel very dangerous. It was obvious that the silver needle was also a very powerful magic treasure. It was even more powerful than a supreme-grade spirit weapon. A magic treasure even more powerful than a supreme-grade spirit weapon. TSK, this kid is really going to die. My luck is really turning for the better. After thinking for a moment, the combination stage black-robed man pursed his lips and the smile on his face completely disappeared. A strong aura with a strong smell of blood suddenly shrouded the entire hall. Go to hell! The black-robed man shouted, and the demon's sword in his hand shot out. At the same time, the aura released by the black-robed man turned into ghost heads and rushed towards Xiaoling Yu. Roar! Although it was a snake, it let out a dragon's roar. The serpent suddenly moved. Its huge body swept across the hall and destroyed all the ghost heads. It opened its mouth and spat out a purple ice arrow that fiercely collided with the demon's sword. The direction of the demon's sword was deviated and could not hit Xiaoling Yu. Xiaoling Yu did not stand there foolishly. Instead, he rushed to the side of the silver pillar and stabbed the silver needle into the pillar. Beast, you're courting death. The combination stage black-robed man waved his hand, and the deviated demon sword flew to the top of the hall. After it expanded several times, it was wrapped in torrential demon flames and slashed at the snake. The snake did not dare to be negligent. It immediately opened its mouth and roared. The dragon infant rushed out again and clenched its dragon claws into a fist and smashed at the demon's sword. Under such a strong battle, the severed soul stage expert did not dare to act rashly and participate in the battle. However, he looked at Xiaoling Yu. Xiaoling Yu was constantly stabbing the silver needle into the pillar. After stabbing one pillar a few times, he would change to another pillar. The combination stage black-robed man was trying to kill the snake first. However, the snake that had already spat out the dragon infant was not so easy to kill. He could not deal with Xiaoling Yu for the time being. The severed soul stage cultivator knew that Xiaoling Yu's strength was not very good. Seeing Xiaoling Yu's strange actions, and thinking of all the unexpected actions of Xiaoling Yu, he guessed that Xiaoling Yu's current actions were definitely not beneficial to him. Thus, he charged towards Xiaoling Yu. Xiaoling Yu had just stabbed 3 pillars and was 3 short of reaching his goal. He did not know if the snake could withstand the attack of the black robe. At this moment, the severed soul stage cultivator came to cause trouble. Xiaoling Yu felt a headache coming on. The snake could sense Xiaoling Yu's eagerness immediately. It let the dragon infant restrain the black robe while its main body swept out its tail whip to stop the severed soul stage cultivator. The dragon infant had gathered all of the serpent's energy and its azure dragon bloodline. Its combat strength was extremely powerful. It could even block the demonic sword with its claws. The snake's main body was also very strong. Even without the dragon infant in its body, it would be difficult for it to kill the severed soul stage cultivator. However, it was easy for it to stop the severed soul stage cultivator. Xiao secretly noted down the credit for the serpent, and then continued to stab the remaining pillars with silver needles. Beast, you have the bloodline of dragons, but you still don't care about your life. How stupid. Taste my soul-devouring demon sword. The combination stage black-robed man was angry and lost his patience. He closed his eyes for a moment and quickly chanted an incantation. Then, he made a hand seal and sent it into the demon's sword. The demon's sword immediately hummed, and the sound became louder and louder. It was as if thousands of weapons were clashing and hundreds of millions of ghosts were wailing. The demonic sound was like a raging wave. The dragon infant, who was originally very brave, immediately covered its head with its two front paws. It seemed to be unable to bear it. If the dragon infant was like this, the snake's main body and Xiao would naturally be affected. Even the severed soul stage cultivator's face turned pale immediately. He no longer fought in the hall and directly fled. A severed soul stage cultivator could withstand such a demonic sound for a while, but a cultivator like Xiao could not withstand it for more than a few breaths. However, at this moment, the emerald green bead flew to the top of Xiao head and cast a cool energy into Xiao body. Immediately, Xiao felt comfortable all over and was no longer corroded by the demonic sound. Xiao was not secretly happy, nor did she think too much about it. She quickly stabbed the last pillar a few times. Then, Xiao gave the snake an order. The snake immediately withdrew the dragon infant, and then turned into a small snake that was put into the spirit beast bag by Xiao. Although it escaped safely, the snake must have suffered a lot of damage this time. This made Xiao's heart ache. Xiao did not have the time to feel sorry for the snake. With a thought, the emerald green pillar sank into his body. Black Robe's expression was ferocious. He pointed at Xiao with one arm. The demon's sword trembled and emitted waves of demonic sound as it stabbed at Xiao. However, at this moment, the 6 pillars in the hall shook together, and a mighty pressure spread out. 6 incomparably resplendent lights pierced through the roof of the hall, piercing into the sky. The violent aura actually caused the space to fluctuate uncontrollably. The spatial fluctuations distorted and sealed everything in the space. Black Robe and the demon sword could no longer exert their power. They could only sway with the spatial fluctuations, like reflections in flowing water. Xiao was not affected by the spatial fluctuations. The green pearl kept releasing waves of cool and pleasant energy in his body to protect his body. At the same time, it also penetrated his body and stabilized the space around him. Xiao knew that the spatial fluctuations would not last for long, so he did not dawdle. He immediately went in front of Black Robe and said hatefully, "I said long ago that I would stab a needle in your butt sooner or later. It seems that my wish will come true now." After saying that, Xiao used the silver needle to stab Black Robes, but fiercely. After pulling out the silver needle, Xiao did not leave. He stabbed Black Robe's vital parts a few more times. He only stopped when the spatial fluctuation stopped. The 6 pillars were quiet and the entire hall was silent. However, Black Robe was completely dead. Clang! Black Robe's demon sword fell to the ground. Chapter 33. If he wanted to go back, he would have to go down the mountain and reach the shore of the Sea of Flames before leaving through the teleportation array. Xiao put away the black-robed cultivator's corpse and the demonic sword. Then he gave the last bottle of 10,000-year queen bee nectar to the serpent to heal its wounds. Then he walked out of the hall and went down the mountain. The spatial pressure on the island had disappeared because the pressure came from the pillars in the hall. Xiao had released the energy from the pillars, so the pressure from the array formation that enveloped the entire sea of flames naturally disappeared. As soon as Xiao Lingyu walked out of the hall, he saw a few cultivators rushing over. Without the spatial pressure, these cultivators who had crossed the sea of flames could directly fly up. Otherwise, they would have to painstakingly climb up the mountain. When they saw Xiao Lingyu, they were all surprised, but they all flew directly into the hall. The hall was already in a mess, so naturally, there were no treasures in the hall. Everyone come quickly. The treasure was taken by this brat. Senior Wu also died at his hands. The severed soul stage cultivator who had walked through the secret passage with Xiao Lingyu also flew up with the other cultivators after the spatial pressure on the island disappeared. He pointed at Xiao Lingyu and shouted loudly. All the cultivators flew out of the hall, but no one dared to attack Xiao Lingyu. First, they had just heard that Xiao Lingyu had killed a body integration stage expert. Second, they couldn't see through Xiao Lingyu's strength and cultivation. Xiao Lingyu, who cultivated the 9 revolution chaos formula, could originally use the chaos energy to deceive the spiritual sense of cultivators whose cultivation was less than 2 realms higher than him. Now that the emerald green bead was in his body, it could help him conceal his strength. What? Do you all want to avenge that old devil? Xiao Lingyu knew that it would be very difficult for him to escape in front of these severed soul stage experts. Moreover, if he ran away, these cultivators would make up their minds to hunt him down. It was better to be bold. Brother, you must be joking. We're not related to that old devil, and he's not a cultivator from our continent. Why should we avenge him? A middle-aged cultivator at the late spirit severing stage said politely, Brother Yuan, this kid is not strong. The reason why he was able to kill old Demon Wu was because of the array in this hall. Now that the array in this hall has lost its power, we don't need to waste our breath on him. He has several ultra-grade spirit artifacts and old Demon Wu's lifetime collection. If we kill him, we will be rich. The severed soul stage cultivator who had a deep grudge with Xiao Lingyu quickly reminded. Except for the cultivator at the late stage of the spirit severing stage, the other cultivators secretly nodded. They were already moved and had the intention to kill Xiao Lingyu. An ordinary man is innocent, but treasuring a jade ring becomes a crime. Xiao Lingyu still smiled calmly and glanced at the severed soul stage cultivator with contempt. He had even faced a body integration stage expert. Even if the situation was still quite unfavorable for him, the fear in his heart was not strong. Brother Chong, since you think this brother is weak, why don't you make a move? The cultivator at the late stage of the spirit severing stage asked curiously. That's because he knows that I have a pet at the peak of the late stage of the spirit severing stage. Moreover, my pet has the bloodline of the Azure Dragon. Even old Demon Wu, who is at the body integration stage, can't do anything to it. Xiao Lingyu grinned and said casually. The cultivator with the surname Chong was embarrassed, but then he argued, Brother Yuan, he does have a very powerful pet. However, his pet must have been seriously injured after fighting with old Demon Wu. If you don't believe me, I'm willing to give it a try. After the cultivator with the surname Chong explained, he took out a high-grade spirit sword and was about to attack Xiao Lingyu. However, just as he took out his flying sword, a huge snake had already circled above Xiao Lingyu's head and spat out the dragon infant. Although the dragon infant was not huge, the mighty dragon aura that overflowed from its body made people feel fear. When they saw the huge snake and felt its late-stage spirit severing stage cultivation, as well as the dragon aura of the dragon infant, the expressions of those cultivators changed drastically, and they secretly took a few steps back. Kill him. Xiao Lingyu gave the order to the huge snake that had yet to recover. Although it had yet to recover and was seriously injured, its combat strength was far from its peak state. However, the huge snake still firmly carried out Xiao Lingyu's order. Its dragon infant flashed in the air and rushed toward the cultivator with the surname Chong. The cultivator with the surname Chong hurriedly controlled his flying sword to stop the dragon infant. However, just as his high-grade flying sword reached the dragon infant, it was smashed into nothingness by the dragon infant's fist. The dragon infant was extremely fast, and its realm was much higher than that of the cultivator with the surname Chong. In order to shock the other cultivators and complete the order given by its master, Shaolin Yu, it charged toward the cultivator with the surname Chong at the risk of aggravating its injuries and risking the collapse of its body. First, it tore apart the other party's defensive Dharma treasure and punched through the other party's energy shield. Then it dug out the other party's nascent soul and stuffed it into its mouth. It seemed to be fine and chewed with relish. This scene made the scalps of those cultivators tingle. The cultivators whose cultivation had not reached the spirit-severing stage even directly went down the mountain. "Brother, you are indeed capable." The cultivator with the surname Yuan, who was at the late-stage spirit-severing stage, clapped his hands and praised. Then he continued, "But we discovered this place first, and we opened the door. Brother, you took all the benefits and made us work for nothing." "It's a little unreasonable," Shaolin Yu interrupted. "You want me to share some benefits with you?" The cultivator with the surname Yuan said, "Brother, you ate all the meat, so you have to give us some soup to drink." That's right. We took such a big risk to come here, so we should at least get some compensation for our hard work." The other cultivators also chimed in. Shaolin Yu said with confidence and arrogance, "If you want benefits, I don't have them here. You can find them elsewhere, or you can directly attack me like that guy just now. If you can kill me, all the benefits will naturally belong to you." It was not that Shaolin Yu was unwilling, but he knew that he absolutely could not compromise or take half a step back at this time. Otherwise, they would be able to guess that his situation was not good and would definitely besiege him. Moreover, he felt that the cultivator with the surname Yuan might have made such a request to test him. If he acted tough and appeared to be full of confidence, the other party would be nervous and not dare to act rashly. After all, that cultivator with the surname Chong and old demon Wu were their examples. The cultivator with the surname Yuan narrowed his eyes and said, "This brother is too ruthless." "Ruthless? I don't think so. You took risks, but did you think I didn't take risks? You have to know that I just fought a body integration stage devil cultivator. In comparison, the risks you took are not even worth mentioning." Shaolin Yu first smiled in response. Seeing that the other party's expression was not too excited, he continued, "Of course, you did indeed open the door. If I take all the benefits, you will definitely feel resentful, so I'll give you some benefits." With that, Shaolin Yu waved his arm and threw out a few jade bottles. The jade bottles were filled with spirit liquid. The cultivators each received a bottle of spirit liquid, but their expressions were not good. Spirit liquid was nothing to them. They did not lack spirit stones. Giving them spirit liquid was like sending away beggars. After doing this, Shaolin Yu waved his hand and called back the snake. Then, he leisurely descended the mountain. A cultivator smashed a bottle of spirit liquid on the ground and said angrily, "Brother Yuan, are we just going to let him go like this?" The cultivator with the surname Yuan shook his head and explained, "This child is a bit strange. Although his snake is indeed injured, it really does have the bloodline of dragons. It is also at the late stage of the spirit-severing stage. Even if we join forces, we will need to fully cooperate to kill it. Moreover, some of us will definitely die." The others fell into silence. They all knew that if there was a life-threatening battle, it was absolutely impossible for them to completely let go of everything and cooperate with each other. The cultivator with the surname Yuan pondered for a moment and said, "This child's cultivation is indeed not strong. After we go out, we can pay more attention to him. Perhaps we will have a chance." A spirit-severing stage, cultivator said, "If we want to make a move, we have to do it early. That fellow killed old Devil Wu and will definitely attract the revenge of the Black Blood Demon. Although he's a bit strange, it is impossible for him to survive under the pursuit of the Black Blood Demon." The cultivator with the surname Yuan nodded and said, "Black Blood Demon. In the entire cultivation world, there is no cultivator or sect that is willing to provoke them." After Shaolin Yu went down the mountain, he directly flew through the sea of fire to the other side. There was no spatial pressure, so even if he was only at the foundation establishment stage, he could easily fly through the sea of fire. After a few breaths of time, Xiaoling Yu arrived at the teleportation array at the bottom of the pit in the falling rock desert. At this time, there were many cultivators around the pit, and they were also constantly rushing towards the teleportation array. Xiaoling Yu was not the first cultivator to come out of the teleportation array. His appearance also caused a commotion, but it did not bring him any danger. He easily walked out of the pit and sped away. This time, although he experienced great danger and almost died at the hands of the old devil, in the end, he obtained the treasure and walked out alive. The only regret was that the snake was too heavily injured. After running at full speed for a while and leaving the pit far away, Xiaoling Yu took out Old Devil Wu's body and found a sand demon to eat it. Of course, Xiaoling Yu kept Old Devil Wu's storage magic treasure. After checking Old Devil Wu's storage magic treasure, Xiaoling Yu's expression was a little gloomy. This was because he saw an identity token with the words Black Blood Demon engraved on it. Black Blood Demon, one of the giants of the cultivation world and the strongest force of the Devil Dao in the cultivation world. However, Xiaoling Yu did not think too much about it. He felt that even if the Black Blood Demon came for revenge, they would only do so if they could find him. The cultivation world was so big. As long as he was not too unlucky, he would not easily run into them. What made Xiaoling Yu happy was that he found several bottles of high-grade healing elixirs and a supreme-grade healing elixir in Old Devil Wu's storage ring. With these elixirs, it would be very easy for the snake to recover. Chapter 34. Originally, Xiaoling Yu wanted to hunt some sand demons in the Falling Stone Desert. However, after seeing that it was no longer necessary. Moreover, many experts in the outer region of the Falling Stone Desert knew about him. It would be dangerous for him to stay here. Therefore, after leaving the Falling Stone Desert, he flew towards the desolate ancient forest without looking back. The desolate ancient forest was actually not far away from the Falling Stone Desert. However, the shortest route would lead him to the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect. Therefore, Xiaoling Yu did not take the shortest route. Instead, he took a diagonal route. Along the way, Xiaoling Yu used 1 month's time to arrive at the edge of the desolate ancient forest. Not far ahead, there was a big city. Its scale was more than 10 times bigger than Taiyang City. It was also one of the most famous cities in the Flying Feather Continent. It was called Falling Feather City. Luoyu City was not too far away from the Void Inquiry Stage. If a nascent Soul Realm cultivator like Xiaoling Yu flies at full speed, it would only take him 7 to 8 days to cover this distance. If he is a Severed Spirit Realm cultivator, it would be even faster. However, Falling Feather City was controlled by another big immortal sect in the Flying Feather Continent. That immortal sect was called the Dragon Subduing Valley. The overall strength of the Dragon Subduing Valley was on par with the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect. It got its name because its founding ancestor had once killed a body integration stage giant dragon on the Flying Feather Continent. Dragons were one of the strongest creatures in the cultivation world. They had a noble bloodline and extraordinary innate talent. Dragons were also the leaders and overlords of the demon race. The strength of an adult giant dragon was usually several times stronger than human cultivators of the same age. Moreover, giant dragons were rarely alone. Every part of their body was filled with treasures. However, it was extremely difficult for cultivators to slay a dragon. As for a body integration stage giant dragon, even a tribulation-passing realm cultivator would find it troublesome to deal with it. This showed how powerful the founding ancestor of the Dragon Subduing Valley was. It was also because of this that the cultivators of the Dragon Subduing Valley were very arrogant. They did not put rogue cultivators or cultivators from other immortal sects in their eyes. Even though the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect and the Dragon Subduing Valley were equally famous, they did not really look at the disciples of the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect in the eye. The Dragon Subduing Valley was one of the top forces of the Void Inquiry Stage. They were different from the void, inquiry stage, and mortal sections. They were more domineering. In their territory, whoever dared to cause trouble would be hunted to death by them with all their might. Therefore, the territory of the dragon's subduing valley was also very peaceful. The cultivators of other sects and forces rarely came here to look for trouble with those arrogant cultivators from the dragon subduing valley. The reason why Xiao Lingyu chose to go to Luoyu City was to avoid the cultivators of the void inquiry stage. In the outer area of the desolate ancient forest, there was only one place that was safe and would not encounter the cultivators of the void inquiry stage. When he arrived at the entrance of Luoyu City, Xiao Lingyu saw a large area of flying feathers surging towards him like waves in the distant sky. They blotted out the sky and covered the sun. It was a magnificent sight. However, what surprised him was that when those flying feathers reached the sky above Luoyu City, they fell to the ground like arrows, as if their weight had increased by a few hundred times. No wonder it's called Luoyu City. Xiao Lingyu praised in his heart. Then, he walked towards Luoyu City. After paying the entrance fee of 5 low-grade spirit stones, Xiao Lingyu walked into Luoyu City. He did not look around the bustling streets. Instead, he went straight to the busiest street in the center of the city. Soon, Xiao Lingyu found a shop that looked very imposing and had a strong background. After standing in front of the door for a while, he entered the shop. This shop had 3 floors. However, its overall height was no less than 30 zhang asterisk 3, 33 m per zhang. The plaque on the lintel even had the words Cloud Gathering Treasure House written on it. The first floor of the shop was very spacious. There were only a few rows of shelves. There were all kinds of cultivation materials, finished pills, and magic treasures on the shelves. There were also a few sweet-looking female cultivators who were serving customers. Xiao Lingyu waved his hand to summon a female cultivator who was serving customers and asked, "You should also be buying finished magic treasures here, right?" The female cultivator nodded and said with a smile, "May I know what grade of magic treasure this senior wants to sell?" Xiao Lingyu replied indifferently, "Various grades." The female cultivator continued, "If it's a low-grade or mid-grade spirit weapon, the shopkeeper on the first floor can appraise it and buy it. If Senior wants to sell a high-grade spirit weapon, you'll have to get the appraisal from the second floor." "What if it's a supreme-grade spirit weapon?" Xiao Lingyu suddenly asked. The receptionist female cultivator was immediately stunned. She had been in the Cloud Gathering Treasure House for a long time, but she had never heard of anyone selling a supreme-grade spirit weapon. After all, supreme-grade spirit weapons were very rare in the cultivation world. "I'm just joking. Take me to the second floor," Xiao Lingyu said with a smile. The female cultivator let out a sigh of relief. She was only at the golden core stage. Naturally, she couldn't see through Xiao Lingyu's strength. Thus, she respectfully led the way. The second floor of the Cloud Gathering Treasure House was equally spacious, but there were only a few rows of sparse shelves. However, there were obviously fewer customers here than on the first floor, and the treasures on the shelves were also much better than on the first floor. In addition to the shelves, there were a few rooms on the second floor. The doors of the rooms were all protected by powerful restrictions. The second floor was clearly of a higher grade, but the counters weren't as long and luxurious as the first floor. There was only a long wooden table with an old man sitting behind it. "Senior Gao, this senior wants to transfer some magic treasures to us. Please take a look." The receptionist very respectfully cupped her fists and bowed. She then said in a low voice. The old man, surnamed Gao, nodded and slowly opened his eyes. After glancing at Xiao Lingyu, he immediately frowned and stood up from his chair. His originally calm face immediately revealed a smile. Shopkeeper Gao walked to the front of the counter and pointed to a room. "Senior, let's talk in the room." The female cultivator's heart skipped a beat, and her expression was a little surprised. She originally thought that even if this young cultivator was strong, he would only be at the nascent soul stage or out-of-body stage. She never expected that Manager Gao, who was at the spirit-severing stage, would call him senior. She actually received a powerhouse who was even stronger than Manager Gao. Xiao Lingyu's expression didn't change at all when he was addressed as senior by a severed soul stage cultivator. After all, he had just killed a body integration stage cultivator. So he nodded with an indifferent expression before tossing a bottle of spirit liquid to the female cultivator as a tip. As manager, Gao made a hand seal to open the door of the room. He muttered in his heart. He couldn't see through the person's cultivation, but the person's aura wasn't very strong. He felt that the person's cultivation was only at the nascent soul stage. Could it be that the person had some magic treasure or magic to hide his strength? Let's see what kind of magic treasure he's going to give away. If it's some low-level magic treasure, this guy is just pretending to be an elephant. The room wasn't big, but it was decorated very elegantly. There were spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs competing with each other. There were also paintings of mountains and rivers hanging on the wall. There was also classical furniture. Senior, please have a seat. Manager Gao pointed at a chair covered with high-quality fur and said to Xiao Lingyu. At the same time, he swept the table with his sleeve, and a teapot and several exquisite white jade teacups appeared. Steam was curling up from the teapot. After Xiao Lingyu sat down expressionlessly, shopkeeper Gao served a cup of fragrant tea and said, Senior, please have some tea. What kind of magic treasure do you want to give away? Xiao Lingyu had already smelled the pleasant fragrance of the tea. He guessed that this tea wasn't simple. Although his expression was indifferent, his heart was filled with anticipation. He couldn't help but take a sip of the tea. In order to prevent the tea from containing too much energy, he didn't dare to drink too much. He was afraid that he would explode. However, what he didn't expect was that although the tea was fragrant, it didn't contain the slightest bit of energy. Although the tea was fragrant, it was a little bland and tasteless. Xiao Lingyu frowned slightly, looking a little disappointed. When shopkeeper Gao saw this, he thought that the other party was dissatisfied with the quality of the tea he offered. Putting down the teacup, Xiao Lingyu said, I'll give away 2 magic treasures. Shopkeeper Gao, please take a look. As soon as he finished speaking, a black sword and a black armor appeared in the air. Demonic sword, demonic armor. Shopkeeper Gao first took a look. When he saw that the 2 magic treasures were overflowing with a strong demonic aura, he couldn't help but exclaim, that demonic sword is a supreme-grade spiritual weapon, and that demonic armor is a supreme-grade spiritual weapon, Xiao Lingyu said calmly. He was indeed an expert. He gave away such magic treasures as soon as he made a move. Shopkeeper Gao was shocked. It took him a while to come back to his senses. Then, he carefully looked at them. Although shopkeeper Gao's cultivation was only at the spirit-severing stage, he was lucky enough to see supreme-grade spiritual weapons because he was the shopkeeper of the treasure house. However, he couldn't appraise supreme-grade spiritual weapons, especially magic treasures of the demonic path. This junior is sure about the demonic armor. I can also give senior a price. However, as for the supreme-grade demonic sword, this junior, it doesn't matter. You can give me a prize for the demonic armor first, Xiao Lingyu said calmly. Senior, are you sure you want to give away these 2 demonic treasures? Shopkeeper Gao asked. Of course. Otherwise, why would I come here? Xiao Lingyu replied with a question in response. There aren't many demonic path cultivators in our Feiyu continent. If you want to lower the price, I don't think I need to waste my time here. Xiao Lingyu didn't wait for shopkeeper Gao to finish speaking and got up to speak. Senior, please don't misunderstand. This junior will give you a price. It's a supreme-grade spiritual weapon, and it's also a defensive magic treasure. The value of this demonic armor is about the same as an ordinary supreme-grade spiritual weapon. An ordinary supreme-grade spiritual weapon is worth 800,000 to 1 million supreme-grade spiritual stones in the cultivation world. This junior will give you 600,000 supreme-grade spiritual stones for your demonic armor. Senior, what do you think? Shopkeeper Gao quickly dismissed the idea of lowering the price and offered a high price. Well, this price is 10% higher than I expected. I can accept it, Xiao Lingyu said, as if she was very knowledgeable. As for your supreme-grade demonic sword, this junior can't make a decision on my own. I need to ask a senior in the treasure house to take a look. I wonder if senior is willing to wait for a while. Shopkeeper Gao asked after seeing that the deal was done. Just don't take too long, Xiaoling Yu said with a nod. Watching Shopkeeper Gao leave the room, Xiaoling Yu's heart pounded. He could deal with Shopkeeper Gao calmly. After all, even if Shopkeeper Gao attacked him, he couldn't do anything to him. However, if a master of the body synthesis stage came, then that might not be the case. The only thing he was sure of was that he had the emerald bead in his body. Even a master of the body synthesis stage couldn't see through him. That was why he agreed to wait for Shopkeeper Gao for a while. Chapter 35. After Xiao Lingyu leisurely tasted 2 mouthfuls of fragrant tea, the severed soul stage Shopkeeper Gao returned. However, there was an additional woman in front of him. This woman had a graceful figure. She wore a long, pink dress, and when she walked, there was a fragrant wind. Coupled with her bright and beautiful face and her gentle and warm smile, she gave off an amiable and easygoing feeling. Xiao Lingyu didn't feel the slightest fluctuation of energy from this woman, which proved that her cultivation was far above his. However, he didn't get up to greet her. He only glanced at her indifferently. The woman only glanced at Xiao Lingyu. After a little surprise, she locked her eyes on the demonic armor and demonic sword that were still suspended in the air. Her eyebrows were tightly knitted together. These are all good things, but they can't see the light of day. After the woman looked, she sat down and opened her peach mouth. She spoke in a soft and sweet voice. Oh, why can't they see the light of day? Xiao Lingyu pretended to be puzzled and asked. These 2 demon treasures shouldn't have been personally refined by little brother, right? The woman's 2 jade-like fingers gently tapped on the table as she asked with a smile. I didn't refine them. Xiao Lingyu nodded in response. Gao Song, go out and greet the guests first. The woman waved her hand and said to Shopkeeper Gao. Shopkeeper Gao knew that he shouldn't ask about some things, so he quickly took his leave. After Shopkeeper Gao left, the woman's eyes flashed as she asked, How should I address you, little brother? My surname is Xiao. Xiao Lingyu still looked very calm. Brother Xiao, you should be from another cultivation continent, right? The woman continued to ask. When your precious treasure house does business with others, do you have to inquire about the details of others? Xiao Lingyu asked sullenly. That's not it. I was rude. However, as far as I know, there aren't many powerful demon cultivators on the Flying Feather Continent, nor are there any powerful demon treasures. I'm not interested in what you know or don't know. I just want to know if you want to buy these 2 demon treasures. If not, I'll go find the next buyer. I don't have time to waste on small talk here. Xiao Lingyu didn't wait for the other party to finish speaking and interrupted with an impatient expression. Brother Xiao is really impatient. Our Cloud Treasure House will definitely accept these 2 treasures of yours, and the price will guarantee that you'll be satisfied. But if it's convenient, could Brother Xiao explain where these 2 demon treasures came from? The woman covered her mouth and smiled. It's not convenient, Xiao Lingyu rejected directly. If you put the demon armor and the demon sword together, I'll give Brother Xiao 1,600,000 top-grade spirit stones. Is Brother Xiao satisfied? The woman didn't mind Xiao Lingyu's coldness and began to talk about business. Xiao Lingyu pretended to ponder for a moment, then nodded and said, This price is fair. Although the price of the demon sword is lower than I expected, you're still doing business. I have to let you make a profit. There are enough spirit stones in this storage bracelet. Brother Xiao, please check. The woman put a silver bracelet on the table, then stood up and waved her sleeve in the air. The demon sword and the demon armor disappeared without a trace. Xiao Lingyu sank his spiritual sense into the storage bracelet and saw countless spirit stones. He glanced at them and put the storage bracelet away with satisfaction. Although the value of the storage bracelet was not small, it was nothing compared to 1,000,000 top-grade spirit stones. Since the business was done, Xiao Lingyu stood up and bid farewell. His intuition told him that this woman was not simple and he didn't want to have too much to do with her. Brother Xiao, you have to be careful when you're alone outside. The black blood demon can become one of the giants in the cultivation world. They naturally have their own extraordinary points. I reckon it won't be long before they find their way to the flying feather continent. The woman personally sent Xiao Lingyu to the entrance of the cloud, gathering treasure house, and suddenly said such words. Her words immediately stirred Xiao Lingyu's calm expression. He couldn't continue the negotiation anymore. Xiao Lingyu glanced at the woman and just smiled without saying anything. Also, even though the black blood demon needs some time, the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect is in the Flying Feather Continent. They won't dare to take action in Luoyu City, but if they go outside the city, they might not give face to the dragon's subduing valley. The woman reminded him again. This time, Xiao Lingyu directly frowned. However, he also didn't say anything. After pausing for a while, he walked away with big strides. After Xiao Lingyu walked far away, the woman shook her head silently and muttered to herself. What exactly is this kid's background? I also can't see through him. However, I'm sure he's not someone from the Flying Feather Continent. I reckon he's a disciple of some expert or force from other cultivation continents. An old man in a red robe had arrived at the door at some point in time, and he spoke up to answer the question. I can feel that his cultivation base isn't very high. However, I can't sense his exact cultivation base. When I scanned his body with my spiritual sense, he obviously didn't notice it at all. However, my spiritual sense couldn't penetrate his body. The woman shook her head again and said, You're right. There are 2 pearls in his dantian. One of them is his gold core, and the other is an extremely high-quality auxiliary magic treasure. The old man in red robe said, What? Gold core? Uncle Luo, you didn't see wrongly, did you? How can he only be at the gold core stage? The woman's beautiful eyes widened as she asked in astonishment. He does have a gold core in his dantian. However, his gold core is very strange. Even I can't tell its attribute. However, I can feel that the energy contained in the gold core is definitely of a higher level than spiritual power. If you look at the fluctuation of energy and the density of the energy, the gold core should be comparable to the nascent soul of a middle-stage nascent soul stage cultivator. The old man in red robe laughed. It was actually such a strange thing. The woman was still very surprised. That kind of energy has an extremely strong effect of repelling spiritual sense. In addition, the extremely high-quality pearl in his dantian also has the effect of hiding his aura and repelling the spiritual sense of others. Therefore, even if ordinary cultivators have a much higher cultivation base than him, they can't see through him. The old man in red robe explained. He only has such a cultivation base. How could he kill old Demon Wu of the black blood demon in the treasure trove in the Falling Rock Desert? Even if he has a big snake in the late stage of the spirit severing stage as a pet, isn't it too shocking? The woman asked in surprise. I don't know about this matter. In short, this kid's origin is not simple. We'd better not have too much contact with him, lest we get into trouble. Although the old man in red robe spoke with a smile, he was serious. What should we do with the 2 demonic treasures? The woman asked. I can erase the traces left on them and then sell them on the black market of other continents. The old man in red robe said as he turned around and entered the treasure trove. He slowly walked up the stairs. After leaving the cloud-gathering treasure trove, Xiao Lingyu first went to a medium-sized magic treasure store and bought a storage bracelet with a large storage space. Then, he moved his things into it, but he threw away old Demon Wu and the storage bracelet he had just obtained from the cloud-gathering treasure trove. Xiao Lingyu had thrown away all of old Demon Wu's things that had his mark in the Falling Rock Desert. Xiao Lingyu didn't dare to keep these things. As for the things in the cloud-gathering treasure trove, he also felt that they might not be safe. It was hard to guarantee that the other party wouldn't do something to them. As for the spirit stones and some cultivation materials left by old Demon Wu, Xiao Lingyu wouldn't give them up. The reason why he sold old Demon Wu's demonic armor and demonic sword was that these 2 magic treasures were really valuable. Secondly, Xiao Lingyu needed spirit stones. His spiritual liquid was almost used up, but his cultivation had just begun. In the future, he would need a lot of spirit stones to purchase various materials and improve his cultivation base. I don't know what cultivation base and background that woman has. She actually knows so much about me. Am I also famous? Xiaoling Yu was a little depressed as he thought. At the same time, he was also looking for some material stores. He was going to use the spirit stones he had just obtained to buy some cultivation materials. As the saying goes, a man is afraid of being famous while a pig is afraid of being fat. Xiaoling Yu just wanted to cultivate quietly and look for his family members. If his luck is good, he also hoped to go to the divine world to visit Jianglanwei. He didn't have any unrealistic dreams or extravagant hopes. He also didn't want to attract too much attention. As for the matter that his master, whom he had never met before, asked him to do, he could only say that he would try his best. Recalling the woman's reminder, Xiaoling Yu was afraid that his whereabouts would be exposed. Therefore, he didn't dare to stay in Luoyu City for too long. After taking away all the materials he wanted from a few large-scale material stores, he left the city. However, he still underestimated some things. For example, his fame and the tracking ability of the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect. His whereabouts had already been exposed, and there were already people targeting him. After leaving Luoyu City, Xiaoling Yu directly flew towards the ancient desolate forest. Originally, he wanted to inquire about the news about Earth in Luoyu City. However, his safety was more important at the moment. If his whereabouts were exposed and he was targeted by the enemy, he wouldn't be able to protect his life. How could he still talk about looking for his family members? The ancient desolate forest was still as lush and green as before. It was the same as when Xiaoling Yu saw it a few years ago. There weren't any powerful demonic beasts or ferocious beasts in the periphery of the forest. In fact, he couldn't even see any demonic beasts or ferocious beasts at all. The animals that he could see the most were human cultivators. Similar to the Rockfall Desert, there were also many towns and cities in the periphery of the ancient desolate forest. There were also top-notch sects like the Void Inquiry Stage. Almost every moment, there would be cultivators entering the ancient desolate forest in search of fortune. They were either alone or in groups of 3 to 5. However, very few of them dared to go deep into the ancient desolate forest. Gu Yunfei once told Xiaoling Yu that even the top-notch experts of the Void Inquiry Stage Immortal Sect wouldn't dare to swagger into the deepest part of the ancient desolate forest. This showed how dangerous the ancient desolate forest was. However, the most powerful demonic beasts in the ancient desolate forest were all in the deepest part. They had their own territories and wouldn't leave their territories easily. Chapter 36. Xiaoling Yu didn't know that he was being followed. The serpent was recuperating and didn't come out to guard him. With his cultivation, the range that his spiritual sense could cover was extremely limited. Any cultivator above the nascent soul stage could easily follow him without being discovered. Soon, Xiaoling Yu crossed the periphery of the desolate ancient forest, but he didn't go too deep. At this time, he was about 10,000 miles away from Luoyu City. He felt that this distance was just right, so he didn't continue to go deeper into the desolate ancient forest. The outer region of the desolate ancient forest was about 10,000 miles wide. As there were human cultivators constantly entering the desolate ancient forest to hunt demonic beasts or search for rare treasures, the outer region of the forest was considered safe. There were no overly powerful demonic beasts roaming about. Even if there were, they would be killed by groups of human cultivators. However, after 10,000 miles, it was a dangerous area. Demonic beasts of the out-of-body stage and the Funshin stage often appeared. Sometimes, there were even cultivators at the form synthesis stage. Therefore, human cultivators didn't dare to come here easily. Even if they did, they would do it occasionally and carefully. The reason Xiaoling Yu chose this location was to avoid human cultivators while also avoiding too much danger. After wandering around for a day, Xiaoling Yu found a cave. This cave was at the foot of a mountain. At the foot of the mountain, there were layers of bushes. The dense bushes almost completely blocked the entrance of the cave. If Xiaoling Yu hadn't searched very carefully, he wouldn't have even noticed that there was a cave here. From the environment of the cave, Xiaoling Yu could judge that there shouldn't be any demonic beasts in this cave, because the entrance of the cave seemed to have been untouched for countless years. Xiaoling Yu didn't break in easily. Instead, he used a wooden stick to gently push aside the thick bushes and vines and put a wild boar in. The cave was very dark. After the wild boar went in, it kept snorting. Feeling that it had gained freedom, it ran in the cave without any accidents for a long time. Only then did Xiaoling Yu enter the cave. She took out a luminous pearl to illuminate the cave. First, she scanned the cave. Seeing that there was nothing out of the ordinary, she used a wooden stick to restore the cave entrance to its original state, concealing any traces of her presence. The cave was not very big, but it was very deep. Xiaoling Yu walked more than 20 steps before she saw the end of the cave. Looks like I need to dig deeper. Xiaoling Yu took out a spiritual sword. She did not need to use any power to strengthen it. Just the sharpness of the spiritual sword was enough to easily open up a cave. Just as Xiaoling Yu was opening up the cave, a mystical eagle hovered in the air about 1,000 meters away from the cave before flapping its wings and flying away. Not long after, the big eagle landed on the shoulder of a relatively young human cultivator. Senior Marshal Brother Lu, that thief has stopped. Should we inform Marshal Uncle Shui now? The cultivator with the big eagle on his shoulder said to a middle-aged cultivator beside him. Junior Marshal Brother Zhang, that kid's cultivation base is not very strong. He only has a spirit-severing stage snake as a pet. With our combined strength, we might be able to capture him. Senior Marshal Brother Lu narrowed his eyes and said, Senior Marshal Brother Lu, I think it's better for us to be more cautious. Last time, that kid was able to escape from the encirclement of the herb garden easily. Clearly, he is quite capable. We must not underestimate him. Let's wait for Marshal Uncle Shui to come before we make a move. Junior Marshal Brother Zhang held a different opinion. Both of them were at the spirit-severing stage. They came from the Void Inquiry stage, Immortal Sect. Previously, when they heard that the informants that the Immortal Sect arranged in Luoyu City had found the thief that the Immortal Sect was pursuing, they rushed to Luoyu City in time and followed Xiaoling Yu here. The two of them still did not know what Xiaoling Yu had done in the Falling Rock Desert. They also did not know that Xiaoling Yu had even defeated a body integration stage expert in the Falling Rock Desert. Therefore, they did not pay much attention to Xiaoling Yu. Junior Marshal Brother Zhang, the two of us have been sent to the outside world for quite some time. Even though the outside world is a colorful world, it is very dangerous. We have always been very careful. Our days here cannot be compared to the carefree cultivation in the Immortal Sect. If we can capture and kill that thief this time, we may be directly summoned back to the Immortal Sect to cultivate after making a meritorious contribution. But if we wait until Marshal Uncle Shui arrives, he will personally take care of the thief. Then, our contribution will seem too insignificant. Most importantly, if that thief is not weak and can fight against Marshal Uncle Shui, it will be fine. However, if that thief is not strong enough and is easily subdued by Marshal Uncle Shui, how do you think Marshal Uncle Shui will view the two of us? Will he think that we are too cowardly for not even daring to capture a little thief? Won't it be too embarrassing for the Void Inquiry stage Immortal Sect? Senior Marshal Brother Lu shook his head and analyzed the situation in a seemingly reasonable manner. I still think that it's better to wait for Marshal Uncle Shui to come. If we act rashly and alert the enemy, but fail to capture that thief and let him escape, it will be even more difficult for us to face the Immortal Sect. Junior Marshal Brother Zhang said cautiously, We can't wait anymore. There are already people approaching the cave. Senior Marshal Brother Lu's eyes glinted brightly as he said with a frown. Junior Marshal Brother Zhang was stunned at first. Then he released the huge condor. After a while, through the huge condor, he saw a group of cultivators slowly approaching the cave where the thief was hiding. All of them had malicious looks on their faces. However, what Junior Marshall Brother Zhang did not expect was that among that group of cultivators, one of them suddenly stopped his slow and careful footsteps and raised his head to look at the sky. His eyes were fixed on the huge condor in the sky. "Not good. We've been discovered. Come back quickly." Junior Marshall Brother Zhang was shocked. He immediately ordered the huge condor to turn back. Unfortunately, Junior Marshall Brother Zhang's reaction was slightly slower. A short golden bow appeared in the hand of the cultivator who was staring at the sky. He shot out a golden arrow which instantly pierced through the huge condor's body. The huge condor only had time to let out a mournful cry before a ray of golden light shone from its body. When the golden light disappeared, the huge condor also disappeared without a trace. Junior Marshall Brother Zhang's face turned pale, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Damn it! How dare they kill my cloud condor?" Junior Marshall Brother Zhang wiped the bloodstains on the corner of his mouth and calmed down his surging qi, blood, and spiritual sense. Then, he cursed angrily. "They also don't know that the cloud condor is yours. I guess they thought that the thief released the cloud condor to warn them." Senior Marshall Brother Lu said, "My cloud condor has been with me for many years. No matter what, whoever kills it will have to pay a heavy price." Junior Marshall Brother Zhang said a little agitatedly. "Junior Marshall Brother Zhang, don't be agitated. These people actually don't have a big background. They should be some small gangs in the Falling Rock Desert. The highest cultivation level among them is only at the spirit severing stage. If you want to avenge the cloud condor, it will be easy. When we return to the immortal sect, we will discuss with the other senior Marshall brothers. Isn't it easy to wipe out these small fries?" Senior Marshall Brother Lu quickly patted Junior Marshall Brother Zhang's shoulder and comforted him. "Now that the situation has changed, we should inform Marshall Uncle Shui first." Junior Marshall Brother Zhang reminded him. "I will send a message to him, but even if he receives the message and comes immediately, it will take at least an hour." Senior Brother Lu nodded and took out a silver bead. His lips trembled a few times as he recorded his voice into the silver bead. Then, he injected a stream of spiritual energy into the silver bead. After a huge tremor, the silver bead returned to its calm state. That bead was a communication spiritual bead. According to the quality, the distance that the message could be transmitted was also different. Boom, boom, asterisk boom, asterisk. Just as Senior Marshall Brother Lu finished sending the message, a series of earth-shattering explosions came from the mountain cave. The two disciples of the Void Inquiry stage quickly flew up into the sky and looked at a place not far away from them. With just a glance, their mouths were wide open and they looked dumbfounded. Not far away, a group of cultivators had surrounded the entire mountain. Each of them had a formation flag in their hands. While the formation flags were constantly expanding, they were also constantly bombarding the mountain with powerful magic treasures. Under the powerful attacks of these cultivators, the mountain began to collapse after a short while. The weight of a mountain was difficult to estimate even for a severed soul stage cultivator. If they didn't have a powerful magic weapon to protect their body, even if a severed soul stage cultivator was pressed by a mountain, their protective spiritual force shield would collapse, and the cultivator would immediately be smashed into a pool of flesh and blood. The other party's actions were too stealthy and swift. Xiao Lingyu was concentrating on excavating his immortal cave in the mountain cave. He did not realize that he was already surrounded. Only when a mountain collapsed did he suddenly feel shocked. Rocks kept falling from the top of his head. The entire mountain was shaking violently. Xiao Lingyu knew that he was in danger. However, when he was about to rush out of the mountain cave, he saw a ray of light flying towards him as soon as he reached the entrance of the cave. That ray of light was formed by a high-grade spiritual talisman. Its power could not be underestimated. He had no choice but to dodge to the side. Fortunately, the spiritual talisman did not lock onto him and he was not hit. However, the mountain was already collapsing. With the explosion of a high-grade spiritual talisman in the mountain cave, the collapse of the mountain immediately accelerated. At this critical moment, Xiaoling Yu instantly released his chaotic energy barrier. Then he asked the huge snake to come out of the spiritual beast pouch. After the huge snake came out, it released a circle of spirit light to protect Xiaoling Yu. It stretched out its tongue and wrapped around Xiaoling Yu. Then, it braced itself and rushed towards the sealed entrance of the cave. However, Xiaoling Yu's reaction was too slow. Just as the huge snake was about to rush out, the entire mountain came crashing down on it. However, the mountain was only a mountain after all. It was made of ordinary mountain rocks. When it collapsed, there was only an instant of pressure. Only a small portion of this enormous pressure was applied to the serpent. Therefore, even though its body was instantly pressed down by the mountain rocks and its scales, flesh, and bones were severely injured, the serpent did not die because of this. It let out a roar and used all its strength to break through the rocks and fly into the sky. The other party seemed to have thought that the giant snake would not die and was prepared for it. Just as the giant snake rushed out, before it had even soared into the air, pillars of spiritual light that were like giant swords that supported the heavens greeted it. The huge snake had been very unlucky recently. It had followed a cultivator who had just started cultivating. It did not expect this cultivator to cause so much trouble, and it was constantly injured. It had not completely recovered from the injuries it had received from the battle with the body integration stage cultivator in the Rockfall Desert. Now it was heavily injured again. The most hateful thing was that it had dragged its heavily injured body out of the cave with great difficulty and was hit by a few more pillars of spirit light. Roar! Chapter 37. Bang! The snake's huge body smashed heavily into the pile of rocks after the mountain collapsed, causing a burst of dust to fly. Its snake tongue loosened and released Xiaoling Yu. Xiaoling Yu, on the other hand, was not injured in the slightest, but when he saw the big snake covered in wounds and bleeding, he naturally felt very distressed and angry. He stared at it, his body trembling uncontrollably. First, he put the serpent into the spirit beast bag and fed the serpent the only supreme grade healing elixir left by old Demon Wu. Only supreme grade elixirs could help the serpent recover quickly without affecting its future cultivation. The serpent's injuries were too serious this time. There was rolling fog all around, and this fog showed all kinds of colors. Even though Xiaoling Yu had just started cultivating, he could imagine that he was in a formation and the situation was very dangerous. Brother, we meet again. A middle-aged cultivator appeared from the fog and greeted Xiaoling Yu with a smile. It's you. Xiaoling Yu narrowed his eyes, and his voice was a little dry and trembling. It was not because of fear, but because of anger. Xiaoling Yu had seen this person before. The other party was the cultivator at the late stage of the spirit severing stage. Xiaoling Yu also knew that the other party's surname was Yuan, and he was the leader of the large and small forces in the periphery of the Falling Rock Desert. I'm sorry, I was a little heavy-handed just now. I didn't hurt your snake too badly, did I? The cultivator, surnamed Yuan, asked with a fake smile. What you gave me today, I will return it 100 times in the future. Xiaoling Yu said hatefully. His eyes were already red. If it were not for his limited strength, he would have rushed up at this time. Hee, brother, you really know how to joke. Do you think you will have a future? Do you think the 6 directions fatal formation we set up here is to be trifled with? Not to mention that your serpent is already heavily injured and unable to continue fighting. Even if it wasn't its peak condition, it would still die without a doubt after being trapped in this 6-direction fatal formation. That's why I advise you to be smart and obediently hand over all the treasures you have, so that you won't be destroyed in body and soul. The cultivator with the surname Yuan chuckled with a confident demeanor. I'm guessing that you haven't finished setting up your spell formation yet. Otherwise, you wouldn't be wasting your breath on me. You could just kill me with your spell formation and take whatever you want. Xiaoling Yu's lips curled up as she spoke calmly. So what if the spell formation isn't set up properly? Without the help of the snake, do you think you can escape? Cultivator Yuan didn't deny it, but he was still full of confidence. You're just trying to stall for time and see if my snake can still fight. I can tell you the truth. If my snake fights with its life on the line, it won't have a problem breaking out of your broken formation, Shaolin Yu said disdainfully. Oh, since you can break out, why are you still standing here? Are you waiting for us to finish setting up the spell formation before sending you to your death? The cultivator with the surname Yuan seemed to be puzzled as he asked. If I want to break out, I don't need my snake to fight with its life on the line. I have a way to break out myself. As Shaolin Yu spoke, she opened her mouth and spat out a ray of light. The ray of light expanded with the wind, and in a flash, it turned into a small boat-shaped magic treasure. After the small boat magic treasure appeared, it released a surge of spirit pressure that swept in all directions like a hurricane, instantly sweeping away the surrounding fog. A supreme-grade spirit artifact, flying magic treasure. When Cultivator Yuan saw the small boat, he couldn't help but exclaim with a look of astonishment. This superb-grade flying magic weapon was obtained from the altar table in the hall, where the treasure was hidden in the falling rock desert. It was an auxiliary magic weapon, but its value was definitely more valuable than those offensive, superb-grade spiritual weapons. Shaolin Yu smiled indifferently at Cultivator Yuan, then jumped into the small boat and filled the boat's energy tank with 2 supreme-grade spirit stones. Activate the spell formation and attack with all your might. Don't let this kid escape. Cultivator Yuan shouted loudly, then waved his hand and shot out several streams of light at the small boat. Then, he opened his mouth and spat out a ray of yellow light. After the yellow light rose into the air, it immediately expanded. In an instant, it turned into a pyramid-like mountain. It smashed toward Shaolin Yu's head. At the same time, after receiving Cultivator Yuan's warning, resplendent pillars of light shot out from the mist from all directions. These beams of light were the ones that shot through the serpent's body before, and their attack power was very strong. Looking at the other party's attacks, Shaolin Yu was a little scared because he hadn't used this small boat before, so he didn't know how effective it was. If something went wrong, the other party's attack could take his life. Star Chaser, rise for me. Shaolin Yu yelled in the small, boat-shaped, flying magic weapon, and he hurriedly made a hand seal and sent it into the compass of the boat. As for Star Chaser, it was the name of the small boat, flying magic treasure. When the hand seal entered Star Chaser's compass, Star Chaser shook for a moment. Then a light shield suddenly appeared, enveloping it and Shaolin Yu. But just as Star Chaser was about to set sail, the attacks arrived and fiercely bombarded the light shield. Suddenly, Star Chaser shook and was unable to increase its speed. As the attacks continued to explode on the light shield, the top-grade spirit stones in Star Chaser's energy slot were also rapidly consumed. In order to maintain a stable and solid defense, it required a large amount of spirit power. Fortunately, Shaolin Yu didn't lack top-grade spirit stones, so he filled a few more top-grade spirit stones into Star Chaser's energy slot and hurriedly made a hand seal to activate Star Chaser. Boom! Cultivator Yuan's pyramid-shaped magic treasure came crashing down. This magic treasure was a high-grade spirit artifact. It smashed Chasing Star into the ground before it could even raise its speed. Everyone within a radius of several hundred miles in the desolate forest could clearly feel the world shaking. As a supreme-grade flying magic weapon, the star-chasing magic weapon's defensive power was truly astonishing. Even after withstanding such an attack, the defensive light shield it released only had a few tiny cracks, but did not directly collapse. However, before Shaolin Yu could recover from the shock and make a hand seal, the Six Directions life severing formation once again shot out beams of resplendent light pillars, accurately hitting the Star Chaser who was still underground. Cock-a-bang! Star Chaser's defensive light shield finally couldn't hold on anymore, and it shattered after an explosion. Fortunately, when it shattered, the energy contained in the defensive light shield sputtered outside, and it didn't hurt Xiaoling Yu. Xiaoling Yu didn't dare to wait for a moment longer. He quickly made a hand seal and sent it into Star Chaser's compass, and the defensive light shield immediately propped up again. 6 directions converge, fatal seal. Cultivator Yuan, at the spirit-severing later stage, was suspended in the air. While driving his mountain-shaped magic treasure to attack again, he also chanted the 6-direction fatal formation. Star Chaser slowly rose into the air with a solid defensive light shield. Just as it was about to speed up, a beam of light more than a foot wide slashed down on Star Chaser like a giant sword. Unsurprisingly, under the effect of the strongest attack of this formation, Star Chaser's defensive light shield was broken again, and Star Chaser was hacked into the ground again. Xiaoling Yu was still fine. The top-grade spiritual treasure's protective function was very reliable. It wouldn't allow its master to be injured easily. But if this continued, Xiaoling Yu wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. Looking at the steaming fog around him and listening to the constant chanting, Xiaoling Yu's expression became crazy. He took advantage of the fact that the opponent's formation hadn't continued to exert its power to quickly make a hand seal. Star Chaser, go for me. After the hand seal was sent into Star Chaser's compass, Star Chaser didn't set up a defensive light shield like before. Instead, it directly accelerated. In a flash, it rose from the ground and rushed high into the sky. While in the air, Star Chaser seemed to be blocked by something, but that thing didn't stop it. Instead, it was directly penetrated by it. Star Chaser's ability to break through obstacles was not much worse than a top-grade spiritual treasure's attack power. A bright beam of light that was a foot wide also shot into the sky and chased after Star Chaser. Star Chaser's speed wasn't at its maximum. The bright beam of light hit Star Chaser in the sky, who wasn't protected by a defensive light shield. Xiaoling Yu immediately felt that Star Chaser's speed suddenly increased by several times. At the same time, he also felt a strong force sweep across his body. His body was firmly fixed to his seat by Star Chaser. Star Chaser didn't have a defensive light shield. Originally, flying at such a high speed would cause a cultivator a lot of damage. At this moment, it was as if there were thorny whips in front of him. Because Star Chaser was attacked, there were streaks of sword-like energy shooting at him from behind. His chaotic light shield was easily torn apart. A heart-wrenching pain came from all over his body. Xiaoling Yu felt as if his body was about to fall apart. Fortunately, Star Chaser's speed greatly decreased after it was attacked. Otherwise, if he maintained this speed and didn't have a defensive light shield, Xiaoling Yu definitely wouldn't be able to walk out of Star Chaser alive. That bright beam of light didn't destroy Star Chaser, who was a supreme-grade spirit weapon. It only caused some damage to Star Chaser that didn't affect the overall situation. However, it caused Xiaoling Yu a lot of damage. Xiaoling Yu endured the intense pain and cursed those cultivators in his heart. At the same time, he formed a seal to stabilize Star Chaser. Buzz! A defensive light shield appeared around Star Chaser. Xiaoling Yu changed the seal and changed Star Chaser's free fall to a straight line. Seeing that Star Chaser was already moving forward steadily, Xiaoling Yu finally heaved a sigh of relief. But then, he frowned and groaned softly. The pain all over his body made him grimace. Bastards, if I don't kill all of you, I'm not human. Even though Xiaoling Yu had always had a good temper, he couldn't help but swear such a vicious oath at this moment. Even a clay bodhisattva had a temper. Furthermore, Xiaoling Yu wasn't the kind of person who was as magnanimous as the sea. He wouldn't do something so stupid as to repay evil with good. In a world like the cultivation world, if someone was ruthless to you, the only thing you could do was be even more ruthless to them. After drinking some spirit liquid and taking a middle-grade spirit pill, Xiaoling Yu meditated in Star Chaser to recover. He knew that someone had their eyes on him. Furthermore, the other party's strength wasn't weak. He had to maintain his best condition. My body is too weak. I get injured so easily. How good would it be if my body was as tough as a Dharma treasure? That you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.